Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining us. We've got a really exciting couple of months coming up with Water Stories. We're rolling out. Um, we've basically been incubating content for the last 2 years, even more than that now. And so we're releasing this whole series. We'll be releasing our water cycle animations, the full water cycle, the watershed death spiral, and the revived water cycle. We'll be releasing our shorts, Hope in a World of Crisis, Water, how it's the untapped solution to our climate crisis, and Water is Earth's Blood. And then we're going to be releasing 2 films that I'm really excited about. One about Walter Yenny in the Canberra National Botanical Gardens in Australia called Desert or Rainforest, where they actually created a rainforest that wasn't a rainforest previously just by working with the natural cycles. And then we'll be releasing Reviving Rivers with Rajendra Singh, which is really this amazing story in India where they've revived 7 rivers, 250,000 wells, reduced the temperature 2 degrees Celsius. This will all be leading up to the launch of our core course, which is going to lead into our training platform to really train practitioners in watershed restoration, to train people like you on the ground, how to really make a meaningful difference for yourself, for your family, and also for your environment and for the climate at large. So really excited about what we have coming up. I hope you all keep an eye out for that. The first stuff is going to start trickling out in February, and then it'll be over the next couple of months that we'll release this big bundle of content. And really excited for what Natalie has to share with us here today. And thanks everyone for joining us here. I'll pass it back to Raleigh.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. So here we are back with Water Stories, back with Sustainable Design Masterclass. It's really exciting to have Natalie back on. We had a webinar with Neil Spackman and I with her about 3 years ago, and I was blown away by Natalie's on-the-ground experience and her just incredible stories showing people how to regenerate landscapes in areas where they had nothing, and refugee camps and in the kind of the harshest areas of Africa and Yemen. And it was so inspirational seeing her ability to train people who live in the harshest area in the world, how to reclaim decency and basic livelihoods, and how to go from an area of just scraping by and survival to actually getting their human rights met. And Natalie Topa, she to me she's a water hero. She's a water warrior. Like, Rajendra Singh is a water man. Natalie Topa is an epic water woman. And so this is so great having her come on, because she's had almost 2 decades of experience showing people how to use water retention, permaculture design, and ecological methods to reclaim their basic livelihood needs and get from a place of survival and warfare to a place where they actually can start thinking about their needs as human beings. And these lessons that she's going to share, not just applicable to people in refugee situations, but they're applicable to anyone all over the world, whether you are fleeing an area of war or whether you're sitting on a few $1 million. It doesn't matter. These methods are what we need in a world where water is scarce, in a world where there's a crisis, because by healing our waterways, we bring peace back to the world and we bring peace back to people. So I'm really excited to have Natalie on to share her journey and share her message and her methods about how she helps people restore water in their communities. And really quick, before we get started, I just want to remind folks, let me share the screen, that if you want to ask questions, we have a community here on Circle. So Cassie can post that link. Cassie's another awesome team member here at Water Stories. And so we'll post that link. It's really quick to sign up. It takes like 20 seconds, but I'm going to ask that people will get their questions answered first if they post on Circle. So you just go to that link, community.waterstories.com. It'll be in the chat box, and then you'll find this water restoration tab, and then you'll be able to type your questions right here in the comment section. So any questions about that, just hit us up in the chat box. We'll send you the link. And officially, why don't we get this show on the road here? So Natalie, it's super awesome having you on, and this is going to be great having you share with folks.
Great. Thank you, Raleigh, Zach, and Cassie. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to do this. As you mentioned, we did a webinar some years ago, and the thing I love about the webinars that you do is that you'll allow enough time to kind of do a deep dive into some of these things. Last night I did a presentation and I only had 12 minutes. So today I'm taking time to not only tell the story of the work I've been doing, but a little bit about my own personal experience and how I came to do the work that I do. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And hopefully you can let me know when it's visible. And I don't have any questions or the chat room open because that's just a bit distracting.
Yeah. And one quick reminder for folks who want to ask questions, ask them on Circle. And we're going to wait until after Natalie's done presenting to open this up for questions. But we can answer a few things in the background, like Cassie, Zach, and I. But like if you want to chat with Natalie, we'll wait till after the presentation stuff. Anyway.
And also for Raleigh and the team, if you feel like we need a bit of a break to just sort of punctuate the flow and open it up to questions, a couple of questions that are coming through, then I'm totally open to that. I'm just not going to have the chat room open. So my name is Natalie Topa. Thanks again to Raleigh, Zach, and Cassie for this opportunity. I've been living here in East Africa for 17 years, but prior to that, I was working in the US, based in DC, working on urban planning, urban and regional planning with a focus on economic development, which is my background. Just before coming to East Africa, I was actually seconded to FEMA the year that they joined Homeland Security, the year before Katrina. So we were in Florida with Hurricanes Francis, Charlie, Ivan, and Jean, category 5, 3, 4, and I think 2 or 3 respectively. And so that was sort of the work that I was doing before coming to South Sudan in 2005. So I came into South Sudan to work on post-war town planning and reconstruction. If you don't know much about South Sudan, it was a giant country when Sudan and South Sudan were one country. But it's been plagued with conflict and war for going on 70 years now. So this title slide was when I arrived to South Sudan and I was living in a tent on the Nile River, and there were no postcards of Juba, and my friends were always asking, what is it like there? And so this was the first postcard from Juba, South Sudan that I made in 2006 while living inside of one of those tiny tents in a mango forest on the Nile River. So I'm starting the story there because, as I mentioned, I came, oops, what's happening? Oops. So I arrived to South Sudan, and immediately the government, I was seconded there to the Ministry of Infrastructure, Housing, Land, and Public Utilities. So they put me in a plane with a bunch of South Sudanese engineers, and off we went to visit different towns and things. But and I was new, I wasn't sure if this was normal, but I was in a tiny little caravan being flown by Russian pilots. And because we didn't have jet fuel available in this war zone, they removed some seats inside the plane, and we carried our own jet fuel inside the aircraft. So they removed the seats, put in these barrel drums of jet fuel, which of course I was inhaling the fumes for the 4 hours or whatever it was that we were flying. And the thing was, it was the rainy season. And if you know anything about South Sudan, remember when Forrest Gump was talking about the rain in Vietnam, and he said, sometimes it even rains from bottom up. We get torrential rains in South Sudan. It was raining so hard, and because of the turbulence, the drums were expanding and cracking, but we couldn't ascend above the cloud cover because of the pressure. So we had to just fly in this rainy clouds for hours until we reached different destinations. So that was my first introduction into South Sudan, which is a country that is full of water for half of the year, Forrest Gump rains, and the other half of the year is full of swirling dust and dryness and drought and food insecurity. And Sud, the word Sud, it actually means swamp. So this was my first intro into South Sudan. And then I'm not sure why my presentation isn't scrolling down, but this is the tent I was living in. You know, it's not a pop tent, but it's just a 12 gauge industrial vinyl, like low grade safari tent. And I lived in there for 2 years in this mango forest. I had 2 tortoises with me. It's like a kind of different type of cat lady. They called me Mama Abugada, which means mother of the tortoises. So this was my life. But as I moved around and started to see, you know, the country more and more and understand the complexity of issues. You know, we would go to towns and even urban areas where flooding, didn't have roads. So the picture on the left with this girl on the log, that's in South Sudan. And the man with the donkey cart is also in South Sudan. You have to excuse me, I'm recovering from COVID. So I'm coughing. But in the north picture, the upper right-hand corner, that's in Khartoum. That's on the Nile River. And I just started to understand the story and this picture of the water-related problems that the country and countries were having. They're now 2 separate countries that underpinned in many cases instability and conflict at different levels. So, you know, I was moving around and learning more about the context of this place and all of the struggles related to water. This is this is the same country. This is in South Sudan, and you know, some of the tribes are major cattle owners, and that's part of the story right now of the ongoing conflict that's there. Our cattle raiding and competition over natural resources and water. So you can see how dry and brittle the landscape can be, even though much of it isn't a swamp. And by the way, these photos are taken in the swampiest area where the Nile River meets the Sobat River corridor. So believe it or not, this is black cotton soil. It's a flooded area during the rainy season. And then you can see how brittle it becomes during the dry season. So it's this dichotomy where half of the year people have food insecurity, water insecurity, and humanitarian aid is literally dropping food out of airplanes. So I just started to be confused about how can we have so much water sometimes and no water at all, and every single year it's very cyclical. So I first came to South Sudan to work on post-war town planning and reconstruction, but then I joined another agency as country director, and we were doing different types of programming, including infrastructure, building schools, hospitals, and even doing things like road drainage. And I included this because we were trying to address the issue of too much water, but we were doing it the sort of old conventional way of just trying to put a Band-Aid on the flooding and do drainages within the town. There I'm with our team of engineers and everyone. So, you know, I just was like, well, I started to realize that we're not addressing any root causes with this, but anyway, then I started to move outside of South Sudan. I became the regional representative for my same agency and moved to Nairobi and started moving around throughout Africa and hearing more water stories from different people. And here I am with the grandmother of President Barack Obama. Her name is Mama Sarah, and Mama Sarah asked me to stay with her in the village and help her make more baby Obamas. But that's just between us. And then while I was with her visiting, I did visit Lake Victoria on the Kenya side, and it was just really heart-wrenching to hear the stories of women who, knowing full well that many of the fishermen are HIV positive, the only thing that they have to exchange for fish so they can go and sell in the market is commercial sex, right? Transactional sex. So mothers were going and having transactional sex, knowing full well that they are probably going to get HIV, just so that they could buy food and also clean drinking water. They even would have sex with HIV positive water trucking drivers in exchange for clean water so they could give clean water to their kids. So just this story of water was just horrific. And it was the source, or seemed to be, you know, at the root of so many different types of hardship and vulnerability. In Liberia, if you go to Liberia, I'm sure today it's probably becoming so denuded, but massive old growth forests are coming after lorry after lorry after lorry filled. This one is not even very full. And this is something you see throughout West Africa, Central Africa, even in Southeast Asia. Myanmar is the worst I've seen, just huge trees being trucked out all day, every day. And what happens is that infrastructure of the local landscape becomes denuded and it can't hold water. And so you start to have more and more extreme events and more, violent water behavior. It starts to impact the infrastructure and the trade corridors. And so that becomes this disaster domino effect. Burundi, Burundi is a country that used to be covered in old growth forest. Okay, probably you can't tell by now, but if you see the smoothness of the hilltops, that's an indicator that water was passively flowing down the mountains because it had tree cover and a thick perennial vegetative buffer from the jackhammering of raindrops. But look at how people are growing food. They're doing it, and these are not even the worst pictures. In some places so steep, and they're tilling every single year. Burundi gets Forrest Gump rains, huge rains. You can't even hear yourself think when it's raining there, and you're in a hut with a tin roof. It's so violently loud. So these massive rain events come, and these people are tilling on slopes like this. How long does it take before that soil washes away? So, those Liberia, Burundi are places that are not water scarce. But this is Somalia. And, just looking at how brittle this landscape is, you can see it's dry, there's nothing growing. And, this is an important photo because many people talk about water scarcity in East Africa. And I don't know that we have water scarcity. We have huge rain events that come, water arrives, and then very quickly just flows right out of the system. So, not to say that this was a jungle before, but it was thick bush. Keep in mind that Somalia used to be the largest exporter of bananas in the world in the 80s. Google it, it was a whole BBC documentary. So the landscape has changed. And as Alan Savory says, which I love, it's not drought that causes bare ground, it's bare ground that causes drought. So this story really started to fill in. It's not only about water and hydrological cycles, it's also about soil, it's also about vegetation and biology. So I'll get into that. When I visited Yemen in 2019, we went 1,500 kilometers from the north into the south, into the Houthi held territories, and passed through more than 100 checkpoints, and was fully covered and was sort of undercover at that time, if I can share that. But these are the kinds of images that I saw. These are bridges that have been blown out. Now, why is Saudi Arabia, funded by US, blowing out bridges in Yemen? It's to cripple the society economically. These are trade corridors, these are commercial routes that have been blown up by airstrikes. And I also just want to recognize that Yemen had very horrific airstrikes this week, and close to 2,000 people have been assassinated, murdered. So just wanted to recognize that. Then moving into Ethiopia, I saw roads, market access roads, which are trade routes as well, commercial corridors, but they're also being destroyed. Who is destroying this infrastructure? Ethiopia at this time was not at war. There's a conflict now with the Tigray region, but it is the extreme water behavior, the violence of the hydrology that has shifted that is causing this destruction. And if you look around, you'll see trees and ask, well, why are the trees not absorbing all this water? Do you know what kind of trees these are? These are eucalyptus trees that are allelopathic, that can preclude different forms of soil life and can definitely impact soil structure. And so the whole entirety of the Ethiopian landscape is being replaced with a monoculture of trees that are not indigenous and that do not help to keep the soil life in place. And again, you have this disaster domino effect that is very destructive to economic infrastructure. I mention economic because for donors and people and governments, that is what matters. Not necessarily for me, but it is a very underpinning, a big issue. So, there are other issues is what my point is. There's human suffering, poverty, famine. Those are also really big issues to pay attention to this, not just the economics. This is a graphic that I generated when I was working in the Somali region of Kenya. And the reason you don't have to go through this, I'm not going to explain the entire graphic. What I'm trying to show here is the interconnectedness of the social, economic, ecological impacts of these, of ecological degradation and climate change. So why I say ecological degradation and climate change, because I don't personally believe that all the drought and disasters and extreme water events we are having in East Africa are due to climate change. Yes, we have increased in water volumes in some cases, but right now here in East Africa, what's happening is that we are getting water either too much or too little, too early or too late. But what happens to that water when it hits the ground and the way that it starts to move and that behavior on the surface is because of ecological degradation. The lack of vegetative layer, the humectic layer, the necrosphere that gets blown away, which I'll show you in a minute. So here in this graphic, a shock happens, traditional livelihoods are less viable, people have to move into new places, that can lead to more conflict, it's a governance issue, the government doesn't know how to handle it, people, are looking for money and survival and basic coping mechanisms. They go out, they exploit the natural environment, they harvest bush products like stone for aggregate and river sand and twigs and trees for charcoal. Men start raping and brutalizing women and girls. So the whole gender issue becomes really pronounced. And so, it is such a systemic impact. And underneath all of this is the issue of water and the stability, and water and soil, and the stability of those to be able to support human life, animal life, social systems, economic systems. So, okay, resilience. What does it mean to resile? To resile is to bounce back and to, regain a healthy status after an impact or a shock or a stress. But resilience of whom or what? Raleigh mentioned that I work in the context of forced displacement. I'm a child of refugees. My family are from Eastern Europe, from Poland and Uganda. They were registered with UNHCR, relocated in the US and in Brazil. So I identify as a Polish American, but the point is my family were immigrants. I grew up as a third country child in the US as a first generation American. Humans move, that's what we do. We have legs, we're mobile, and that's okay. And people move for different reasons. Mixed migration can be about economics, about education, about conflict, about all kinds of things. So what are we talking about when we talk about resilience? Resilience of whom? It can be of people, for sure, and we do care about that. Oh, and I forgot to mention, forced displacement refers to refugees, people who have left their country. IDPs, internally displaced people who have not left their country, but who have remained within. And returnees, which are people who are coming back after displacement. And of course, the host community, which some people don't like that term because it is not necessarily like the choice of a hosting community to host. They don't walk around with like trays of welcome drinks. So they can definitely also be very, very impacted. They already are extremely resource scarce. They don't have basic needs met and social services and things like that. And now suddenly 30,000 or 100,000 people show up in their backyard. That can cause conflict. And so we always want to address all people that we call them displacement affected communities. So people who are impacted regardless of the angle in which they're coming into this. So resilience of whom or what? Of people, of crops, of the local ecology. It can be of animals, including wild animals or domestic livestock. Entire farms, right, need to be resilient. The soil needs to be resilient. Roads should be resilient. Markets, shelters, namely displacement shelters is what I'm referring to. Entire watersheds need to be resilient. Communities as a whole and women and girls. But resilient from what? Like, what is the risk to them? Well, it can be flood. It can be drought, it can be market disruptions, which we saw massively during COVID. And as I always say, food security is not, cannot, should not be a function of the market, because Raleigh, your stomach doesn't give a hoot about markets. Your stomach wants to eat, and markets fail, your stomach doesn't fail. So how do we buffer and make resilient to market disruption, food systems, families, So resilient from food insecurity, energy insecurity, seed insecurity. That's a big one. Anyone who knows me, I've gone 3 times to India to study with Dr. Vandana Shiva. I'm very aware of, the corporate agenda to control food through seeds. Let me just stop there. So also extreme conditions or events, climate change and ecological degradation, as well as social instability and predation, rape, violence, brutality from men and boys to women and girls. And if I'm a little harsh, if this is the first time you've heard such a strong statement about men versus women, it's because I'm sick of listening to passive language. We talk about sexual and gender-based violence or violence against women. I'm done with that. It's men usually doing the violence. So I'm shifting the focus to emphasize the predator and not the victim. Okay, so the tools that we have for designing resilient spaces, landscapes, are 3 main ones. And by the way, I did want to make a little bit of a plug because I am taking this course with Javin that I hope Raleigh and Zach, you might mention towards the end on low-tech erosion control. And so this is the direction that I've really been moving into, but I'm trying to continue to build my skills and capacity. So I'm taking this course with them. And when we talk about low-tech erosion control, I haven't started the course yet, but this is from the work that I've been doing, is the tools we have or what we're trying to affect are soil, water, and plants, or in other words, geology, hydrology, and biology. So soil and geology, earthworks to help plant the rain in degraded landscapes, generating structures that boost living systems such as earthworks and stoneworks. Every design is completely site specific. There is no rule of thumb. There is no, copy and paste model. So when we do the earthworks and try to manage the soil and do citizen engineering, what we're doing is affecting water and hydrology. So we want to save water in well-structured soils for drier times, extending the seasonality and doing water banking. We want to mitigate flooding. We want to protect from drought. We want to create microclimates, and we want to recharge groundwater systems. I'll get into those things later. Plants, you can't do the soil and the water without the biology, right? You can't do a big swale and not seed it, because the first rain that will come will immediately start to erode and melt away that structure. If it's a big rain like we have here, and of course, depending on the soil. So we need those root systems to start to come in and stitch together and weave together the structure and the stability of our earthworks, so that by the time the water comes, they'll be less susceptible to damage and destruction and all that. Sorry. One second. What I added was spaces and built structures, because a lot of times we're doing water harvesting work in physical built spaces and with infrastructure, whether that's roads or it's a concrete compound. When I say compound, I mean, I don't know what you say in English, like an office complex. In the field, we have a compound, which is usually a walled compound of their offices. So walls, rooftops, impervious surfaces, hardscape surfaces, they really impact the behavior of water. So you can't ignore those. Roads, footpaths, rooftops, all those things, even walls and heat retaining surfaces, okay? So this is the toolbox. And we're doing this at different scales. When I say we, I mean the work that I've been leading in different agencies and different projects that I've been involved in across East Africa and beyond, also Southeast Asia. So, starting from very, very tiny scale, which I should have included Raleigh and Zach and Cassie, my apartment, I live in an urban area in an apartment in Nairobi, Kenya. And I also do all kinds of things in my apartment to practice permaculture ethics, from composting to beekeeping, cheese making, sprouting, spirulina, beekeeping, mushrooms, vermicompost, micro livestock, mealworms, black soldier fly larvae, crickets, lots of stuff. So that's another scale that belongs lower. But around refugee shelters, right? And a shelter could be a tarp with sticks that's baking hot in Somalia. So, let's protect it from flooding. Let's shade it from the west sun. Looking now to the next level, homesteads and our office compounds, sort of the area around the home, the larger area and the environs, and how do we create a sponge? And when I say sponge, I mean, how do we increase the absorptive capacity to pacify water behavior and store and bank that water deep into the soils, covered and protected with cover crops and shaded trees and things, so that we can extend the season. Then looking at the whole village, okay? What is a village? It can be an urban space, an urban village, a refugee camp, or settlement. Those are different. I won't go into it, but they're different. But lots of people together closely with lots of nutrient and waste for recovery potential. And then, of course, looking at the landscape. So subcatchment, micro watersheds. How do we spongify the whole watershed with trees and water harvesting structures and things like that? Oops. Uh-oh. Why is it asking me to force quit? Uh-oh, that's not going to be a problem. Okay, so trees can resolve a lot of this, but we cannot talk about trees without water and soil. Raleigh, should I just go ahead and stop the PowerPoint, or is it gonna?
You could there's some background tasks that you can shut down. So if you go to that force quit window shows up again, you can quit out of some of the other non-running applications. Like you could probably quit out of Google Chrome and just leave PowerPoint and Zoom up. Okay, well, if that happens again, I'll look for your guidance for first quick coaching. Okay, so trees meet so many of our needs, right? If anyone has studied permaculture, am I speaking quickly, by the way, Raleigh, and everyone? Or are you reading me well? I'm reading pretty well.
I think you're coming through great. Yeah, I think everyone's loving it so far.
Okay, great. I've not seen any comments, but hopefully they're not complaining. So food, fodder, fuel. I normally say food, fodder, fiber, fuel, fertility, and pharmaceuticals with an F. You can extend that to like flowers and finance and many other things, but food, human food for our sustenance, we can get that through trees. Fodder, and when I say fodder, I'm not only talking about ruminants and livestock, I'm also talking about pollinator fodder. Those flying around people, they need fodder, they need food. So flowering trees, flowering perennials. Perennial stability is the name of the game here. Fuel. When I say fuel, we can talk about sticks and twigs for rocket stoves with convection heat made out of cob. We can talk about pyrolysis and charcoalization of wood fuel. We can talk about leaves and biomass for methane production through biogas. There are a lot of different ways to derive fuel from perennial biomass, but that's one of the many ones that we need when we talk about energy security. And by the way, in the context of forest displacement, energy security can be a major driver of conflict between community members and community, displaced community and host community, because suddenly 10,000 people come, they're chopping down your trees so they can cook goat meat, can be problematic. Fiber, I'm not talking about for biogas generation. I'm talking about for construction, for clothing, for materials, your pulp, for paper products, for whatever, crafts, furnitures, furnishings, dishes. We are tree people, okay? Our planet is a tree planet and as a forest planet, and we are forest people who need all of these forest things. Fertility, that can be for nitrogenous trees for building fertility in the soil, but not only nitrogen. And I kind of feel like we often are a little nitrogen obsessed. There are other elements of fertility that we get from trees. Forget about not just the soil organic carbon that we get from falling leaf matter and all of that, but I'm talking about the actual chemical interactions in the soil with different types of trees. One, for example, is the Balanites, which can increase your yields if you're doing grain crops in a alley cropping, blah, blah, blah. So trees help to build and protect soil structure, okay? Their root systems help to tie it all together. They keep dropping leaves all day long. The soil is a big stomach. It needs to eat all day long. There's little people in there, engineers, they need food. And I know I'm oversimplifying things, Raleigh and team, but I know there are some people who are not as conversant, maybe in the audience, so I wanted to break this all down. So trees are trees, their roots, they're, physically, mechanically, chemically, are providing soil structure and stability. And when we start to remove the trees from the landscape, then the soil dies and it becomes dirt, right? Soil is alive, dirt is dead. And it can start swirling around. When we used to have, dirt doubles, dust doubles in the landscape, they're now becoming small tornadoes here in East Africa. And when you talk about disasters from climate change, it's not only flood and drought, okay? It's fire, because these wind gusts, you remember what happened in Boulder last month? These wind gusts are ripping through the landscapes, burning people's assets. The wind is blowing the roofs off of their houses. It's tearing away their soil, their fertile topsoil. So it's on the move, it's going away. And what people neglect to talk about is that soil erosion, soil loss is really the #1 biggest environmental problem that we have on our living planet. And after that is biodiversity loss, pollution. But we still struggle as humans to sort of think systemically about the entire living system. So what happens then is that, the water, okay, in a healthy, thick living forest, like where Raleigh lives in, Oregon, where you have these big giant forests, a huge rainfall can come and up to 90% of that water will never leave the forest. It just soaks right into that giant spongy forest floor. When you remove all of those trees, that water has nowhere to go except away, right? That magical place called away, like when we throw things away. And so it joins with other little water buddies and they become big flood events. And this continues to rip off fertile topsoils and cause major destruction and eat viable arable lands. So I'm forcing quitting calendar. Yep, force quit. I'm forcing quitting Chrome.
Yeah, Google Chrome.
Not Zoom.
Yeah, keep Zoom and PowerPoint open.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so, so we start to have massive erosion. We start to have massive loss of water and nutrient out of the system. So the viability for that system, that ecology to return becomes less and less, and it definitely becomes less able to, provide for life, human and animal. I talked earlier about geology, hydrology, biology, soil, water, and plants is the name of the game, okay? So, Raleigh, I told you before we had our little prep call, bald men are okay, bald mountains are not, okay? So if you're a man with a bald head, you're great. If you're a mountain with a bald head, we need to immediately address this. We need to talk. So this, in this situation, what happens is when all the landscape has been so totally denuded, the absorptive capacity is stripped away, and then water just starts to trickle down and create erosion scars and patterns that get deeper and deeper and more violent. And so what we want to do is take that water, which is fast, incisive, and destructive, slow it down, right? We want to pull that destructive energy out of it by redistributing that water across the landscape, slowing it down, calm down, spread, and sink into the soil and save it and store it for as long as we can with a bunch of other layered methods, cover crops, trees, microclimate, mulches, all those kind of things. So there are a lot of strategies for earthworks and stoneworks, and the work that I lead is either labor-intensive handworks, labor-based earthworks, so humans digging, or machine-based earthworks, which is, we use bulldozers. Usually I prefer excavators. I work very closely with Warren Brush, by the way. I'm partial to excavators, but we use bulldozers, excavators, graders, dump trucks, you name it. So there are different types of strategies that you can use in a landscape to harvest water. Terracing might be one. That's a lot of what happens in places like Yemen, Southeast Asia, where you have very steep slopes. Keyline design is another one, which in East Africa we don't see a lot of. I know some people have the diggers, but bioswales on contour, gully plugging with stoneworks, with stickworks, with all of. So there's a lot of different ways that you can create a prison for water so it doesn't move. And it's better to not strong arm nature. You don't want to come into a giant one big thing. Do lots of teeny tiny little things, okay, starting from the top all the way down. So when we start to bank that moisture and water deep into the soils, we start to have this biological uplift. We no longer have bald mountains. We really want to make sure that we have very properly treed mountaintops, ridge tops, hilltops, so that that water, as soon as it falls, can already be, have sort of a shock absorber. Okay, so when working with communities, one of the most exciting things that I just love doing is when we do sort of a resource review, okay? To look at all the things that people already have, right? One thing I can't stand about the humanitarian sector and emergency sector and development in general is that we create a lot of dependency and this perceived notion that, nothing that we have is good or right or valuable, and we, our life sucks, we're in misery and poverty, and we must rely on outside people, agencies, to provide something. So, it's the global north has created that by and large, because we give a lot of handouts and don't address root causes. So it's really exciting to come in and change that narrative a bit and ask questions. I'm not an expert in these contexts. I don't know anything about them. I don't know what it takes to walk, for 6 months from a place in South Sudan to a Ugandan refugee camp, and all the insanity that you have to go through in that process. I'm not an expert in that, but other people are. You have to listen, eyes open, mouth shut, and understand people's traditional knowledge, their indigenous wisdom, the ancient innovation that they come with, all that experiential capital, okay? So in this case, I love when we have a mixed group with host community and people who have been displaced and are settled in that community, at least temporarily, because there's often a very rich exchange. Women will say, oh, we use this for baby stomach digestive problems. They're like, oh, well, we use this for cow eye problems. Like this woman on the right in the blue, she had this cactus, and she said, this cactus is very useful if you squeeze it and you get the juice. If you have some blemishes on your skin, it's really good, like for acne or any irritation. But if you're having problems with hyenas disturbing your livestock at night, you can dip it in blood and throw it to the hyenas and it will kill the hyenas. So we love multi-purpose, multi-use things. So here we're working with a community. We set them out and ask them to collect resources, and they come back with seeds and beans and ethnobotanical treasures of herbs and medicinals. And I don't know, it's always an amazing learning exchange when we do this. But the point is, there is a wealth of resources available locally. And likewise with soil building, right? Many NGOs and donors, which I find highly unethical, promote chemical farming, right? There's a big machinery in our planet driven by, capitalist ideals. We have a fossil fuel industry. We have a defense industry that, we have all of these violent economies that also produce chemicals for farming. And those chemicals, and they are accompanied by GMO seeds. So you give people GMOs and you say, here's this awful chemical that you need to use with this seed. That's not how our planet works. No, like we don't need poisons to create life-giving foods, period. I'm not going to go into that, but hopefully people are really clear on how I feel about this. It is unethical for donors, UN agencies, certain corporations that I won't name, but hopefully we know some of the ones we're talking about, to come to poor people, give them seeds that do not regenerate again and again and again, and poisons to kill their soil. I want to remind everyone that the word human comes from the word humus, right? Not that great thing that we eat from Lebanon, but humus, the humectic layer of rich, organic, organism-rich soils. So all of these materials are available, whether it's nitrogen, whether it's carbon. We mix all of those things into the soil to create fertility and sponge, water holding, water absorbing and holding, spongy, carbon, and all of those things. So we do these DoubleDug beds, which I'll get into in a minute. And then we want people to understand how to use local survey tools made with local materials. You can use bunyip levels, water levels. I have a laser level here in my house. But the most obvious one and easy and kind of democratic one that anyone can access are just basic A-frames, right? So it's an A-frame. We show everyone how to calibrate it, and we use that to measure the natural contours and natural patterns of the land. If I can just say, I mean, in the whole permaculture movement, oftentimes I see mandala gardens and weird, cool shapes, but why are we imposing an artificial pattern onto the landscape when our job should be to extract the existing pattern and use that to inform our design so that we can possibly harvest all of those natural flows and influences comprised of water and nutrient? So please don't do mandala gardens. Or if you are, then don't teach other people that and say it's permaculture. So I love sacred geometry, like if that's what your lesson is, then do that. Okay, so design, really basically, this is Regina's house. Regina lives in dryland, Kenya. She's a Turkana woman. They're very, very dry there. But when water came, her house would get flooded. So here's Regina's house. And what's going on with Regina's house? Where does the sun set? That sun is super intense and of the west sun of the sunset. There's a saying in Somali, in Somali culture, sometimes a husband will have multiple wives, and the children of the wife of one wife may say, the evening sun is like your non-parental mother. They have no mercy. So the west sun is super hot and can kill crops. It can make your house hot, your kitchen hot. If you live in this African context where your kitchen is like a tiny structure outside baking in the sun. So where's the water coming from? Where is it pooling and causing flooding? Regina's house was getting a lot of flooding. Where's the shade? We have to be shade hunters, okay? When I arrive to a site, I ask the teams, where's the shade? Be a shade hunter, because that's the enabling environment for little delicate, fragile beginnings of your system. Where's the gray water going? That is a major resource. So with this information, we made this little design, and we captured the water that was flooding Regina. She was an old widow, but she would get water inside her house up to her mid-thigh. So by creating a bioswale on contour behind her house, and you can see that we've got stones here for a little place where she can walk up and put her gray water for this banana. You can see that banana. And now this water is still going to continue its path downhill, but we just want that to happen under the soil, where it can take a year, not on top of the soil, where it can take 1 second to reach 6 meters away in a major flood event. So you can see the bioswale soaks water, and it's going to keep going down, down, down. It's going to saturate these beds, which are also 60 to 80 centimeters deep. And then we fence the whole thing. So we're mitigating flood, we're mitigating drought, and it's by design. Okay. So this is another view. And so this is the bioswale. People might ask, gee whiz, why are you using stones as mulch inside the bioswale? Because that's all we have. We do like to mulch inside of our swales for extra water retention. If you don't have mulch, if you don't have crop debris or dry grass or dry leaves, use rocks, because that's what's there. In Algeria, this is how they build their houses. And I was working with a team there. And the first thing I wanted them to understand is, like, this is how they build their houses. They have a brick home with a brick compound wall, and it's all baking in the sun. It's basically a giant oven. So immediately, shade hunters, where's the shade? This is the west sun. So we've got shady area next to the wall, behind the house. How can we capitalize on those? How do we optimize that opportunity to start to bring in shade trees, because the likelihood of their survival will be higher? And, and try to use those spaces in a design. So, this is how we can convert. We've got water harvesting swale and a little perma garden with DoubleDug beds. You might put a goat or a seating area or outdoor living space. For some of the refugee shelters, I've had women complain their shelter is not big enough. They have 7 children, they're a widow. And what they're saying is not necessarily my house is not big enough, but I don't have enough livable space for my family. So we always try to extend that out away from the shelter, creating shade either with vegetation or recovered resources and materials, an old torn tarp. But, this is getting more into the placemaking. elements and climate resilience. If you're in this house, you are very hot. And if you're an old woman who has COVID, you don't want to be in this house. You also don't want to be in this house, but this house is, I mean, because you don't want COVID and have a hot fever, but this is going to be way more pleasant with cooler temperatures. So speaking of COVID, I made this graphic for our teams when COVID hit, because as, you know, being in the humanitarian sector, NGOs were just doing water basins and hand washing points everywhere. And I thought, is the legacy of this going to be more mosquitoes and malaria? Because you dump that basin out and you just create a honeymoon suite for mosquitoes? Or can we take that water and create a mulch basin, a banana circle, you know, dig a hole, fill it with mulch, plant it with a little micro food forest, you know, whatever, but get the water from destruction to production. You know, stop the public health risk of that water and get it into a situation where the mulch and the fungi and mycelial network can clean that water, filter it, and feed, you know, with moisture and nutrient surrounding plants. This is something I see all the time in all over the world. So in the humanitarian sector, especially with WASH programming, water, sanitation, and hygiene, you know, we have tanks. And in Africa, almost all the tanks are black. In Yemen and Middle East, you'll see more white tanks. But the situation on the left is the legacy of water tanks in East Africa. You have a black tank on a high, you know, tower, baking in the sun, dripping, leaking, having seepages that collect, and it just becomes some Disneyland of disease. It becomes a mosquito honeymoon suite. Why? Let's change that story. Dig a hole, fill it with mulch, plant it, plant something to block that hot afternoon sun, paint your thing white, cover it with water, I mean, with vines and perennials. So this is not an expensive thing, okay? It's a tiny micro solutions through micro design opportunities. And really the challenge of scaling these things up is to get people to think like designers and be citizen engineers. I'm sure that question is going to come up. Someone will ask, well, what is, you know, is it scalable? Okay, so I talked about DoubleDug beds. So these, I led a training in South Sudan in November, and we did a little sponge farm. I don't know if it was a garden or a farm. It was kind of a farden. So we did these DoubleDug beds, but this is like dissected so you can really see the guts of it. So we dug down deep. We measure the bottom using an A-frame. So that whole thing should be level on the bottom. So water will spread evenly when it comes. And this is a bioswale on contour above it. The beds are on contour. But look at how much stuff we filled in there. Carbon, nitrogen, leaves, sticks, twigs, food waste. You can put a dead chicken in there. Put a dead mouse in there. I don't want to list all the dead things you can put in that. But this should be a biological hub that breaks down, holds water, and basically becomes a water storage tank with a garden on top. So taking that concept, even in Somalia, with the tiniest spaces, having little nano, food space systems, moms now are digging down, they're filling the beds, and they're finding the shadiest place around the shelter to do that. And even if it's just one single bed, you can see that, planted with some different greens and different types of things, they're at least able to add micronutrients to their food. Is it going to meet all their food needs? Maybe not. Is it going to at least contribute dark, rich, leafy greens, which do not exist at all in this town? Heck yeah. Don't forget, refugees are not receiving like these 5-star Michelin meals that are well balanced. No, they get WFP wheat from the United States, grown with fossil fuels and fake seeds and all kinds of corporate chemical garbage. They get palm oil from from Indonesia that's destroying peatlands. So anyway, they're not micronutrient rich foods, and that's what we need to supplement. And this is how people are doing it independently using tiny little design mechanisms. Here's another example. It doesn't get smaller. It doesn't get more accessible than this, right? Anybody can do this. So this mama here, she has a hole. filling it with a bunch of stuff. We do it on contours so that water hopefully can at least passively enter. And we never step and compact on that. It stays fluffy so water can enter. And for 5 years, you don't have to dig that thing again. And it has so much fertility inside, you can plant super, super intensively. Because plants are not competing with each other. They just go straight down to access their nutrient and water. This is Martha. She's a Dinka from South Sudan. And I know where she comes from. You know, where she comes from is such black cotton soil. It's like driving on oil. It's clay, pure clay. And of course, you know, refugees are not like Donald Trump. They get prime real estate. They get the most undesirable land that a host country, you know, might be willing to offer. So in this case, that was very rocky soil. And she said to me, Natalina, that's what they call me in South Sudan. She said, Natalina, I don't know how to grow food in rocks. I said, let's show you. And let's show you how those rocks can become an asset. So we created a wonderful little tiny permagarden just outside her house, using water harvesting, tiny little swale, using those stones as stoneworks to harvest water and nutrient to protect it, you know, using stones as a mulch, using stones as a silt trap. Now, one rainy season later, this is what Martha's garden looked like. So we integrated perennials. These were perennial beans that I brought from Somali refugees in Kenya. This is in Uganda. She's in Uganda. We brought in bananas. We brought in passion fruit that covered the whole entire tree. So in this photo, like we entered inside, and then she's standing here inside next to this banana with one of our, yeah. So, you know, we just became a jungle of food. It is so diverse, and there's so much biomass. She can just keep chopping and dropping and continuing to feed the soil. The soil is a stomach. Feed it all day, every day. Okay, so you know, I think that agencies that deal with displacement affected populations should also imbibe those principles and, you know, basically internalize the ethics of what we're trying to do to support people in their resilience and adopt those in our own operations. So if I think, you know, NGOs who have field offices, our compounds, our office compounds, all should be designed for regenerative resilience. So in this particular compound, this was a compound, an NGO office compound in Tanzania. This is not to scale. We had buildings, we had trees and vegetation, but what would happen is water would enter inside the compound, and it was creating so much structural pressure on this internal wall. It's quite a steep hill, right? This is the top uphill and going downhill, as clearly indicated by these arrows for people who are not familiar with gravity. And so this wall was getting a shock. These are shock stars because all this water was collecting. The landlord was desperate. He'd brought in engineers and contractors, and they could not crack this nut. So Warren Brush and I came here. We conducted a training. The water now, instead of just busting that wall, we spread it out, distributed it across the small space. And the existing trees, we retrofitted with little water harvesting, what I call smile berms. You can call them half moons or media lunas or whatever you want. And we did DoubleDug beds. So we just tried to create all these sponge pockets of water retention in the space. So this is where this is the gate, that's the guardhouse. This is the gate where the water was entering and, you know, going on down to that wall. So what we did is now we created a bioswale on contour. We covered it with a trellis, and you're going to see trellises in this presentation. Why trellis? Gardens, farms, just like forests and natural systems, should be vertical and three-dimensional, right? If you think of, like, I'm not a religious person, but the Garden of Eden, I don't think it was like a monocrop farm that gets harvested and is just a brown, brittle field, you know, for half of the year. So it should be vertical. It should have perennial stability. It should have verticality and lots of cool dimensions to create microclimate and shade and coolness. So if you don't have trees, or while you're waiting for your trees to grow, add a trellis. So we have this trellis, we have a tiny little footbridge, and now that water is spreading out. And it's spreading in this direction where you can see the berm. By the way, swales don't have to have berms. I know that that's permanents all over the world are like jaws dropping. But you can have, which is called a level sill, like a sheet flow, right? So if you remove the berm, then you don't have to concentrate the exit point at one spillway, and it can just evenly sheet flow out of the berm across an entire landscape. So pro tip. So here it is, it's all spread out. And then this is what it looked like. I think this is about 4 or 5 days later. So now our, the office compound has a lovely garden. It's going to fill in and grow. It's a demonstration site for donors and partners. It can be a learning site for your own staff and technical staff. And then around each tree and stuff, we retrofitted with, other water harvesting, like mulch basins and stuff, as I mentioned. So in another compound, this was a really big compound, NGO compound in Dadaab, which is the Somali part of northeastern Kenya, or from your perspective, northeastern, that side. So buildings, lots of trees. And then what happens is, because there's so much hardscape, impervious surfaces that don't absorb water, the water runs off of the rooftops and all of the hardscape surfaces, including, one thing in East Africa and in places around the world, you have people who sweep all day long, usually women, because of hashtag patriarchy. But it's often women, mostly women, who are going to be sweeping the compound to keep it clean. And there are reasons that people do that: snakes, insects, that kind of stuff. So they take that organic material, burn it often, or throw it away and view it as a waste. So anyway, what happens is, when you're sweeping the compound all the time, the soil is becoming more and more compacted. There's no soil life to fluff it up and, dig it and soften it. And so all the water just collects into the sump and floods. So what I did is, first we came in and did a massive chop and drop on all of the neem trees. And we used that not that we chopped the trees down, we gave them a big haircut, okay? So we gave a big haircut to the understory of all the trees. The first thing, within an hour, everyone was like, oh my God, it's so much cooler in the compound because the wind breeze is blowing through. And we took that material, and I created what I call green islands, like spongy islands around the buildings. So we now have so many like parking lots of that water. Here the water is moving like in highways. We don't want highways of water, we want parking lots. So this is what I'm referring to. Like here, they sweep. When water comes off of this roof, it pools here and starts to meander towards the sump. And so what I did is, where we had these islands, we just broke them up and dug deep. The team, it was actually, around my birthday, and the team, I got almost 8 tons of goat manure. It was really sweet. They brought in, all this goat manure, and where these islands didn't exist, we came in with new stones and we made them around all the buildings. So now when that water comes off of the roof, like, you may not be able to afford gutters and, rainwater harvesting for domestic use, stored in the soil. So now that water will roll off the roof. And because we've created this thick sponge with all the chop and drop biomass from the neem trees, plus manure, plus, I don't even remember, lots of stuff, sawdust. So this is what I mean by these kind of green islands around every building. Also, this compound had 50 ACs. I put buckets under a number of them and averaged that in a 24-hour period, on average, these buckets are collecting 7.5 liters of water. Maybe somebody can translate for Americans what that is. I don't know what that is in American, but the buckets are harvesting the water, and normally that just evaporates. It's allowed to just evaporate. And let me pause here for 1 second, because this is clean water. It's just from evapotranspiration from the ACs. It's not alkaline from the ground, which is super salted in this region, in Dadaab. And so what I did is, with the team and our engineers, we just cut all those pipes and added a hose pipe. Here, Andrew, the engineer, was putting this hose pipe that goes down here into a banana circle, and the sweeping from the compound, this had just been swept, and normally they burn this or throw it away. That now goes into this mulch pit. We've planted bananas and all these things. So on that issue of the wastewater, I also want to mention in Dadaab refugee camp, you have about 200,000 people of prayer age, primarily Muslim, and there are other nationalities in Dadaab refugee camp, but let me just talk about the Somali population. 200,000 people, okay, of prayer age, 7 years or older, every day using up to 5 liters of water. You know, every time you're washing for ablution, for prayers, you're washing with water, and that happens up to 5 times a day, and that can be 5 liters of water in one day. 200,000 people times 5 liters a day is 1 million liters of water in a single day. That translates to 30 million liters of water. Hey, UNHCR, if you're out there, 30 million liters of water in a month. There is no reason that Dadaab refugee camp isn't a thick, thriving, vital food forest where the major protection risk for refugees is like falling mangoes. So let me just stop there. Wastewater from ablution, from ACs, from gray water, massive asset, especially where we don't have, where we have perceived water scarcity and drought and aridity. In the same compound, we have a rub hall. Rub hall is what NGOs use. It's just like a giant kind of permanent tent where we store food distribution, NFIs, non-food items, soap, buckets, that kind of stuff. Because refugees get a kit, like a, basic kit. But it collects a lot of water. It's a big rooftop. So all of the water from this rub hall was pouring down and making its way to our office building and causing damage to the foundation. So what we did is, this is the same site, but in a different perspective. So I trained the team in this compound how to make an A-frame, how to measure the contours, which we did. And then we just we made a garden. And so now what I did is, this is a trench that we leveled on the bottom. You can see this is the uphill side and this is the downhill side. So this trench is level on the bottom and it goes, I'll show you another picture. We also made garden beds, which are here. And I had calculated 132,750 liters just on one side. On this side, that amount of water is going towards the office building. So I like to say we take water from floods to food. So what we had done, here you can see in this design, the water goes into this trench, which is level, meaning it's deeper on this side than it is on this side because this is a hill, but the bottom is level. I hope people understand that. It can be hard if you're not familiar with, level. And so then from here, these are on contour swales. So water falls into this trench, everything fills up automatically. The spillway here fills this next swale. And then this spillway goes into a giant mulch basin with like bananas and stuff around it. And then the water now continues well away from the building. So this is, we have solved an engineering question, the flooding by a garden. And by the way, this growth that you're seeing, this was just 3 weeks later. And this is pure sand, by the way, I forgot to mention, this is pure sand. I developed a whole chicken compost system. So all the sweepings and office waste, we have, over 100 people in this compound. Food waste and everything goes to the chickens. We make chicken compost. We apply that to the garden, building soil structure to also hold that water. That was from, just a deep bedding system for chickens. So we use their mechanical action and, mechanical traction and nutrient to make compost and bring it back to the garden. So why did I do all this stuff in this particular compound? Is because, that team there has a project that they have to implement, but the security situation in Dadaab is really bad. And oftentimes, when I go out to the field, depending on the location and the team, I'm often surrounded by guards. And I've been in places in Somalia where I have 10 men with AK-47s surrounding me. So in that context, I couldn't go out to the field. Like I could go there really momentarily, but I had to use the office compound of the NGO as the training space and the demonstration space so the staff could see in action what the design is doing and then try to take it out into the field. And they would give me 10 minutes to go to the field and give feedback to the team. And I'm just running around screaming and the team is taking notes. So it is a challenge. And so because of that, I would try to get a bit creative with different tools. Like here, I just took a piece of cardboard and drew things like here's a swale. These are garden beds. This is a silt trap with like Napier grass for fodder. These are big trees. This is a different type of tree. This is wind. This is the evening sun that has a scary face, and a smiley face is the morning sun. And this is a banana circle. So try to create a lot of variation in the design components. So then here, like this is just an example, like let's say this is uphill, this is the evening sun. So how we're trying in a super dry land desert context, how do we create enough shady verticality, microclimate with perennial stability, and integrating all of this design so that everything that grows has some shade or protection. Oh, I forgot to mention, I talk about 3 thieves of water. There are 3 thieves of water. Number 1, sun. Number 2, wind. Number 3, slope. So this design or this tool helps to design with farmers that I can't access because of security, but our team can go there. And then they discuss and use these pieces to say, how do we protect from those 3 thieves of water using these many different types of strategies, right? This is not just one thing. It's not just keyline or just alley cropping. There's lots of stuff going on here, right? Just like there would be in nature. So here's another maybe more digestible model of what I'm talking about here. You know, the idea of harvesting water off of the road, which we do a lot of, doing hand dug dams, putting the nutrient source, like the chicken compost up above the garden, like we did in that Dadaab compound, you know, integrating fodder with vegetables and market crops and blah, blah, blah. But this is what I would call a sponge farm. So I refer to sponge, you know, shelters, sponge farm, sponge village, sponge camp. So there's that. And then of course, you know, I'm just trying to use whatever tools I have at my disposal, but sometimes I'm in an Uber and they send me pictures and I'm like, so I just do some little finger drawings to give feedback to the team and do remote mentoring, even if it's on the fly, even if it's super simple, but they understand it. I usually accompany it with like a voicemail, or I make videos, very, very, you know, my energy really goes to the field teams and the refugees on the ground. I kind of prefer usually to deal most directly with them in some cases, rather even than the NGO staff. This was, you know, in the Somali region of Kenya. This doesn't look very exciting, but given the remote nature of the guidance I had to give, I was quite excited. So you can see a series of interconnected, you know, swales that will spill from one to the next. There's beds and things, you know, it wasn't as intensive as I wanted it to be, still working on it. But it's had, you know, impacts. Like, you know, we have a number of sites that we are working with in Dadaab. I'm also moving away from the term farm. So I told the team here, don't say farm. I don't want us to say agriculture because people just get the wrong idea. And I don't want us to say farm, because if you say farm, people get a certain image in their mind, which is not the image that I want to promote. So we call them agroecological sites or food forest sites or whatever. These are not that well done. I would have done them differently, and I give feedback to the teams, but you can see already this sort of biological uplift. This was, you know, this is just in 1 year of all this water that's being harvested. So do we really have water scarcity in the Somali region of Kenya, or do we have design scarcity and capture scarcity? Here's just another image. Look at how the vegetation is responding. It's just, if you knew this context and that it is like a pit of sand with nothing that can grow, you would find this quite remarkable. So I'm going to talk about, so I hope that people can see I'm trying to go like higher up in scale to demonstrate the different scales that I've been leading work on. Can I just check in with, because I'm not reading any comments.
Sure.
Raleigh,
let's see, we're a bit an hour and 15 minutes in. So okay. I'm thinking a thing that we could either do is maybe take like a few questions and then come back and finish the conversation. Well, what slide are you on? Do you have slide like 80 or?
Well, I'm not sure.
Do you feel like I can just 3/4 through? But yeah, let's open up. Let's do some questions right now.
Yeah, any burning questions?
People are definitely loving it too. I mean, there's a lot of comments. People want to be you when they grow up, and yeah, I think if we don't have super awesome questions, I mean, you're sharing so much. Hate to cut you short.
Yeah,
as
it's
well.
a lot. Okay, I mean,
So
I know
like
it's a
4
lot,
questions
but
here.
okay.
Cool. Yeah, no, this is just awesome. I mean, I appreciate, like you put so much effort into creating this. And, we've done sometimes presentations where people have like 3 images and it's hard to get through 100 images in an hour. You got to be, you got to like spend 20 seconds on each slide.
I know.
But
I'll try to
okay, so
hurry.
here
But
we are
questions?
on the questions. Yeah, let's start here. So Mara was the first person. She says, Natalie's one of the most compelling speakers ever. I wish I had an obligation. Okay, so she's looking for the recording. Everyone's getting the recording after this. Okay, MB says, have there been any successful use of biodigesters to help with decentralized fuel generation and irrigation water byproduct?
What does that mean?
So have you ever used biodigesters to like deal with human
generation.
waste?
Oh yeah. There are examples all over the place, but I did design one circular market in Uganda where we had both public toilets and a slaughter slab. Sorry for vegetarians and vegans. But it's a little concrete slab where animals are processed, and then all of that waste we're putting into a biogas digester. The energy from that digester is being sold into the market to women. There's a 10 stovetop structure. So they're using that fuel that's, again, from human nutrient, which I mean poop, keeping poop in the loop, human nutrient, slaughter waste, and the bioslurry. This is the exciting part for me, is I designed the bioslurry to be pumped into a forest of giant green clumping bamboo behind the market so that we can have pyrolyzed charcoal, bamboo, and timber to reduce the pressure for forest products. So right now, if you go to the market, you'll find charcoal, you'll find timbers, mostly from eucalyptus, but now we have this giant green clumping bamboo fed from the bioslurry. So yes, and there you'll find examples all over the world on human nutrient for biogas for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So cool seeing, waste being put to good use, especially biosolids.
Resources.
So Zach is asking, how can we help support and spread awareness about your work?
You're doing it.
How are people going to get to you? Well, you said you wanted people to know, like, kind of reach out to you on LinkedIn and
yeah, LinkedIn is a great place. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. I do have Facebook groups. If you search Natalie Topa : permaculture and resilience design, Natalie Topa : regenerative communities and circular bioeconomy, which is really about construction. It's more about the physical environment, the built environment. I have Natalie Topa : seed saving and sovereignty, Natalie Topa : fungi and mycology, and Natalie Topa : the permaculture kitchen and home, because I try to be chefy. But no, I think, the opportunity that you guys create, like there's no one else that would allow me to give such a long presentation. And I know there are people, probably some people have logged out, gone to bed, but there are people who want more of the story. And if you're trying to give a 12-minute presentation, you can never get into this amount of detail. So,
I mean, the good thing is,
speaking of which, yeah, I mean, you're doing great. Everyone's loving it. This is, I think, the best webinar we've had so far. I think we could just keep going into your presentation, Natalie, if you're game for it. I know
I said no one ever. Thank you, Zach.
Yeah, like we got basically the people have only joined. Like, I don't think anybody's really left. Maybe few people have left, but it's like now we have 101 people attending. So
okay,
why don't we let it rip? I think there is one last question, then we'll get back to it. It's from Frank. He says, hi, Zach, our work is carried out on livestock production. Our soil is decomposed granite, and when conditions are right, rain naturally penetrates at point of impact. Pretty long question. Repairs about grazing management. In the first instance, it can be extreme as complete exclusion for the first 12 months. We also use swales, but in a different way to get those in the presentation. P.S. I followed the link, but failed to get on there. Okay, so this is more of a statement versus a question. So why don't we get back to the old back and see what more awesome examples you have.
Okay, well, just on that for Frank, I mean, it sounds like soil organic matter is missing, right? Soil organic matter is like the juice. Like it's, if your soils are too clay or they're too sandy, they're missing the soil organic matter, which is the conduit to life, which will either, that will build the soil structure either to be more aerated or to be more retentive. Okay, let me just continue then. Okay, so this is the farm of Denisa. Denisa is a wonderful woman who was pregnant at the time of this training with a husband who literally did nothing the whole entire time. She has since had the baby. Her name is Natalie. So Denisa lives on a bald mountain, right? Bald men are hot, bald mountains are not. So Denisa's bald mountain was delivering all of this massive water to the back of her house. It was causing, again, foundational damage. And then it went around her house in 2 giant gullies and creating flooding for farmers downhill. This is also training that we did with Warren. So what we did is we created these long bioswales on contour, and there may be people who aren't familiar with swales. A swale is like, imagine creating giant long throats in your landscape that become a temporary long skinny pond when the water comes, right? The water is coming down and it's perpendicular to the flow of water. So water enters, it spreads out, and it becomes like a throat. Just imagine that your soil, your farm is just drinking and drinking and drinking and swallowing all that water, and it's quenching this thirst. So we did a series of 3 swales harvesting water from the gully. I don't have good pictures of this here right now, so that's a shame, but just imagine a gully. What's another name for a gully? A ditch or a giant erosive, like a mini canyon, like a tiny canyon going down the hill. So we diverted the water from that canyon coming into this first top swale. And also I want to say that her roof, you know, you can see her house here. She has that rooftop that's from iron sheet. And then she sweeps the heck all around the compound. So the minute all that rainwater reaches her, you know, hardscape surface, it really starts to like gain speed and pummel down, and it was just ripping all of her soil away. Denisa used to only farm maize, which is corn, and cassava, which is manioc for people on the Americas, I think. And she was doing chemical farming. You had little bottles of pesticides everywhere. It was super sad. Her soil was dead. She's poor. They have food insecurity. Her husband is useless, pregnant. Imagine. So we made these giant swales, and these little baskets have little tiny baby trees in them. So this is a baby food forest. So what we wanted is all this water to enter into this food forest. And you can see on the right-hand side, every single tree has its own water harvesting structure, which we call a smile berm. And in fact, like this one has like a main tree, the long-term tree, like let's say a mango. But on the like the dimples of the smile, we also included bananas or papayas, which are more short-term trees. But every single individual tree has its own water harvesting structure, but the pattern itself is in a water harvesting structure because it's in a fish scale pattern, so it's offset. So if water collects here and it's too much, it will spill out and enter into this one. And when that's too much, it will spill out, enter into the swale. The place is a prison for water, okay? It has 3 swales, big ones, all in trellises with food forest integration. And this was one rainy season later, baby Natalie is here, and baby Natalie was born into a jungle of nutrient-dense organic food. And here, you know, mom Denisa, she's harvesting okra, which is a traditional vegetable. I only bring indigenous seeds so that mom can plant again next year. Why would I give Denisa a fake GMO seed and be like, see ya, good luck buying new seeds next year? Now she can harvest, she has been harvesting seeds, selling seeds, storing seeds, but why? You can just let things, like let the seeds drop and grow again. And Denisa doesn't speak English, but you know, I call her with a Swahili speaking person every few months just to see how she's doing, see how baby Natalie is doing. And you can see here, those baskets, can you see those tree baskets? Those are the same ones from the previous, that's actually over here. So those are the same tree baskets. You can barely see them. You don't even know what you're looking at. It's just food on food on food, nutrients, you know, and this was in the beginning of COVID. I forgot to mention, market systems have failed. You know, everybody is starving and in poverty. And she's like, you know, Netflix and chill, you know, she's giving food to her neighbors. She's got money. By the end of this rainy season, after she had harvested everything and was going into the dry season, she didn't have enough food to continue selling, but she at least had enough food for her entire little family through the entirety of the dry season, which was a revolution for her, okay? And the only input is knowledge. Can I just stress that? The only input is knowledge. Yeah, we brought some local bamboo, we brought some local spades or shovels, you know, but there's nothing about this intervention that required external inputs, things like that. This is in one rainy season, same Denise's farm. Here, see this little tiny footbridge? That's the same footbridge within one rainy season. So we are talking about Tanzania. They receive a good amount of rain, okay? That's why you're seeing this massive biological uplift. But if I show you this was 1.5 years later. So this is Denise's kitchen. See that bald mountain? And all this just dry, brittle, you know, look at 1.5 years later, a food forest, cassava, popos, papayas, I mean, bananas, I don't know the English names, like amaranth, you know, so many, just, we planted so many things. Okay, so here's another example. So this is now we're going up higher in scale. This is what I refer to as a sponge camp. So here, a training was conducted. Look at, you can even see the sweep marks. Okay, sweeping, 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 sweeping. You know, women in Africa have time poverty because they're doing things often as instructed by men, and it just drives me crazy. You know, women have to go get the water, women have to deal with the food, women have to sweep the compounds, women have to do all of the things while many men sit under a tree and drink tea. So it can be really frustrating. So time poverty is a very big, real thing for women here in Africa. And anyway, the point is that they're sweeping away all the organic material. They're hardscaping, they're compacting the surface. It continues to be more and more impervious and runoffy. And so my former staff here he was in the field and I was guiding remotely. And, you know, the first thing we did is ask questions. You're not the expert there. You don't know anything about this place. So guide the team, guide the community in an exercise, and they will explain to you. They are the experts. They're the consultants on local knowledge. The water flows, that's what she's showing here with his arrows. Where are the main facilities and assets and places, and maybe places to avoid or places of nutrient concentration, whatever that might be. So, you know, they send me the mapping and I was sending back various types of strategies, you know, on the right. So again, just with my finger on the iPhone, and a lot of videos and voice messages. So here they are, they're starting to do what we call planting the rain. Before you plant the crops, before you plant your trees, you plant the rain. And that term comes from Zephaniah Piri, who is quoted often by Brad Lancaster, who is also one of my teachers. So planting the rain, or planting the water if it's gray water. It's not all raining gray water, so it's still water. So here, starting at the very top of the system, you know, when you get out of the shower, Zach, do you start drying your feet first or your head first?
Usually the head.
Usually the head. So we start at the top of the system and we want to catch that water before it starts falling down to the feet. So same with our site or our system. Start at the top, stop that water, get it in the soil before it starts pummeling down and creating flood. So that's what's happening here, people getting to work and then starting to integrate verticality and the trees. Don't forget trees. I mean, swales are tree planting systems. And oftentimes here in Africa, when I see permaculture trainings, we have naked swales. What's more awful than that? Nothing. So we got trellises, we've got baby trees, look at how much mulch. Like, you know, I tell farmers here and community members, if the sun can see your soil, if you can see the soil, the sun can see your soil, and the sun's eyes are sucking the life and moisture out of the soil. So cover it, you don't want it to be seen. So you can see beautifully, these are double dug beds on contour. So again, 60 to 80 centimeters deep, filled with all kinds of spongy organic material, which will also be fed not only from the runoff that's coming from rain, but the run on, right? If for water, guys, we talk a lot about run off, but not run on, right? How are we holding water in the system that is trying to exit? That's one thing. But the other thing is water which is passing by or coming from up above, how do we get that into our system? So, that's what we're doing a couple things here. So look at this. This is a prison for water. Water cannot leave, okay? These are security checkpoints. Show your COVID vaccine card at every one of these, or you're not passing. This is 3 weeks later. I mean, you're just creating this biological uplift, nutrient, water. Where water accumulates, life generates. I can't remember who that's a quote from. It might be from Jeff or from Bill Mollison. I don't remember, but you get the point. This is 6 weeks later. Same place, guys, the same place. Remember that white, barren, concrete looking land? The other thing that I show the teams to do is, because we see this grass roof, water falls and starts to accumulate and add to flood, we do these roof water beds. So again, these are deep, 60 to 80 centimeters, and they're along the line of the roof. You have to be careful with these because if you have earthen homes, obviously that residual moisture can compromise the earthen structure. So be mindful of that. And the household here was very mindful of that. They know that could be a risk and they're monitoring it, but they really wanted to do it. So again, water, nutrient captured, stored and held in protected soils and structures. I just love this because it was so quick. And look at, this is for 6 weeks from this to this. And now 8 weeks later, look at, it's just like this, the things are coming up over the trellises, the pumpkins, and this brings down the heat island effect, right? That when you have those bare, naked, hard surfaces, they start bouncing temperature and heat and light and just creating this like hot misery. And this is this like cool jungle, cool green jungle-ness. Okay, I'm just trying to move on quickly. So here is another example where in this valley, people were dying from flood. You don't think it's a very steep valley, but literally people were dying here. So we had, as it accumulated downhill. So this is the top of the system. We made a 100-meter swale, which you can't really see here. And then we did a giant food forest. Well, not giant, it was like 50 to 60 trees. But this is what I was talking about. You see this? When I talk about fill and spill interconnected circuits, take a look at this. You see there's a swale, there's a stone armored spillway, and always you have to have spillways on swales, people. And the rule of thumb, the minute, I just said there was no rules of thumb, I lied, here's one. Your spillway should not be less than the width of the berm and the swale. That means this is too small, but you get my point. This is the width of your spillway. So water enters here from uphill, it spills out and it goes, and it comes now into this swale. This is a prison for water, okay? Water is getting stuck here. So that's how we reduce flooding in that valley. I'm gonna now quickly go to Burundi. This, we had 5 young boys who died on this mountain in Burundi due to flash floods, massive water events. And please take a look at this footpath. Do you see this trail? Footpath, footpath, footpath. Many gullies form along footpaths because the footpaths are becoming compacted hardscape. So water gains energy from speed, volume, depth, and drop elevation. That's when you get those head cuts, right? Like the rip uphill. So the footpath was the cause of these gullies, and they keep just stepping to the next, as the gully is growing and growing, they just keep shifting the footpath over to the left, and it's eating the farm of the guy next door or the late woman next door. So this can be, conflict as people start walking on that farm to not fall into the gully. So big problems. What we did is, train the community here to understand that the relationship between the flow of water, the destruction, the gullies, the erosion, and these incidents of death. So starting at the very top, we unbalded we did a lot of chop and drop on the trees on the top of the mountain, different interventions, gully plugging, check, one rock dams, check dams. So actually I was here with Daniel Lawton And it was here that I was evacuated when COVID hit, and I was in the last plane out of Burundi when they closed their airspace. It was pretty insane. And Daniel had to go home prematurely. He was only with us for 2 days in the field, and he had to go home to Australia. So starting at the very top of the mountain on those footpaths where the water starts to gain speed, and these are the same footpaths that created the downhill gullies. So every 1 meter, check dam, check dam, check dam, check dam. Why do we use stones? That's what we had. We just use what we have to start to try to slow down and pacify and pull that energy out of the water. So, okay, these are animated. These are not real before and after pictures. Just let me put a disclaimer. So imagine here you have your hill. Here's your, the water that goes down the footpath and starts creating gullies. So what we wanted to do is get that into farms and turn that water from flood to food, as I always say, or from destruction to production. So getting that water off of the footpath into the farm on swales, into food forest, into smile berms, until you have a fully established system. And this is what that looks like in real life. So, this is the footpath that goes down to those gullies you saw. And here, and, Brad Lancaster was great. He was, really on Facebook Messenger with me as I was trying to make sure I was doing all the stuff correctly, because, you can create major siltage. When you're asking water to take a turn, what's happening is that turbidity is carrying lots of debris and lizard tails and feathers and seeds and nutrient silt. And when you are asking water to take a sharp turn, in that moment that the water slows down and changes its speed, it drops out all of that silt, and then you get a building up of silt, and the water then can just jump over your structure. So you have to desilt. Okay, so here's a little sponge garden, sponge farm. So again, you can just see we're just using the natural contours of the land and trying to create that absorption of moisture. And this is Mediatrice and her son. And this is just in a perma garden that she made around her home. And of course, we do encourage people, if they're doing mulched structures, to use household gray water. But anyway, we just had 100% food security increase during COVID. And we stopped the flooding on the mountain in 1 year. These are the gullies. We came in and we did gully plugging where, these are not going to last, clearly, #obvious, but they're locally available materials. Look at banana stalks. That's going to decompose within a season. But in the meantime, it's going to trap and sieve a bunch of debris and material that will start to terrace off that gully. And this is what happened. It started to, you can see, it starts to silt up, fill in. We planted things, but there was all this, recruitment of vegetation. But we did plant things that people want to use, like lemongrasses and tithonia for pest control and lots of stuff. Now look at what happened. Oh yeah. Look, a year later, can you see this totally filled in gully? This was not one of the deeper ones, but it was a major one where nobody could farm here before because of the flood water. And this is land reclamation through restoration. So we plugged those gullies, and now this land became usable again. Please note they're continuing with bad agricultural practices, which are going to continue the problem. So it's really about the software, the engagement. And here we had, every week doing walking tours with the government, with governors. And it has spread, by the way, to the surrounding collines. Colline en français is the hill. So the surrounding hills has already started to spread because there's nothing from outside. Only knowledge was the only input, but they have everything they need to get this done. And they've seen the impact and they're doing it. So infrastructure, roads. Here in Africa, we have miter drains that send water to literally just away from the road, and that's it. So here what we've done is where we're, this was a project that was grading the roads, but that's not enough, right? That's just a lost opportunity. So we want to protect the investment of the roads. These are dirt roads and these are market access roads. So we want to get the water off of the road as quickly as possible so it can stay dry and passable. And then that water instead can go into the fields. This field here is a farmer named Opoki. The water, came, we did this diversion drain, 2% grade, and then leveled it off onto contour, which is 0% grade. And then here is where he was farming rice. I was there the day he harvested the rice. He harvested the rice and we're walking in the field and it's soggy and full of water. We're like, oh, Pokey, plant more rice right now. Jesus, what are you doing? So like, that's just to show you how storing that water in the soil has economic benefits, nutrition benefits. So also, this was a place that got completely flooded. You could not drive through here. So what we did is, from here, we made a diversion ditch, also 2% grade. We leveled it off onto contour. This is also with Warren, by the way. And then we literally like picked the flood up and put it into this dam. There's a borehole here, which also became recharged, right? Because we're like, this water is infiltrating deep into the groundwater, the water table. And then that, after we recharged this borehole, the women were like one pump, like with a finger, like, and water was just spewing out. They were so happy. This pond now has fish in it. Oops. It has fish inside. They use it for livestock watering. They use it for crop production. And there was a guy who, this young guy who's 20 years old, hadn't been married yet, which is like, weird in this context. And so he was able to use the water from this pond to construct a mud house. He got a wife and he's super excited. And now he's building another house and probably another wife is coming. So great. Okay, so this is my friend's house. She lives on a conservancy and has a permaculture farm. And it was funny, she actually asked me to help her with some cob building. So I brought Crocs because I thought I was going to be stomping mud. But when I showed up, there was a big bulldozer and she said, actually, can you build me 2 dams? Because my airplane hangar is getting flooded. So, and she wants to reduce flooding in the compound. So, and she had made 1 dam, but it was not, just wasn't very well made and it was very small. So these are the 2 dams that I made. I started them, I only had 2 days. So this was with a bulldozer operator who really wasn't very happy that a woman was telling him how to operate his scoops. But we made, this is what they look like after they've been filled up a bit. And the top one actually, I had an issue with sealing it, but my friend was able to use pigs to glade the pond quite successfully. So this is what it looks like, taking water off of, and I left her with assignment to finalize like the extension of this swale, the extension of this swale on here and here. But here, the system goes like this. Water comes pummeling down. We're turning it into this pond to increase the catchment because it's quite flattish here. So there's not a lot of catchment for the pond to fill passively. So when you do a pond with swales, it's like you have these arms reaching out to the landscape, pulling water into the pond. So water from the road, and then also, all this water that's falling downhill will also come here into this pond. Then I made about a 20-foot spillway because I was really nervous about back flooding into the road. So a 20-foot spillway here, which was going to direct water, be picked up through this lower swale. And this pond is actually this one here. And that is not only for livestock, but this is a conservancy. So zebras, wildebeest, giraffes, all those people come to drink from that pond. All right, we're getting towards the end somehow. This is the sponge village of Atego. This is a project that we did. Warren and I called Warren and I said, I want to do a big village. We had 190 people. We had 6 machines, 2 excavators, 2 bulldozers, 2 dump trucks, 2 weeks. We arrived to this village and there were clear erosion scars, massive flooding and erosion evidence across the landscape. There were, tree stumps everywhere and charcoal pits. They'd cut down, the community had cut down so many of the trees and were using them as charcoal, which is a major income source for poor people. They also had this, can you see that little crawl with tiny little micro cows? And then here we had this village. Then they also had a road alongside that was carrying flood down to the Nile River, which was totally swelling. So what we did is created this whole interconnected circuit of fill and spill structures. We did a valley tank at the very, very top. That one is called Warren Dam. And then water, this is a 2% channel that came and dumped into these on contour bioswales. So again, filling and spill, fill, spill, fill, spill, fill, spill. And then down here, we have the silt trap. This is Natalie Dam, it's the biggest dam. And the chief here had a little baby daughter named Natalie. It's so coincidental, it's amazing. And then this one is Martin Dam. So this is machine dug, hand dug. And then here we did gully plugging with stones and bamboo. We had food forests. And then we took an excavator and harvested all this water off of the road and dumped it into the permagarden here, which we made below the cows, because that passive flowing of nutrient, we wanted to make sure to capture that into our permagarden, which has biospheres on contour, double dug beds, and little, food forest pockets above and below to protect from the sun. So this project did have some issues. Okay, this is not to scale, obviously, but this guy that lives here, there was a latrine that was really near the swale, and it started to get flooding from up, from below. So, some changes and adjustments had to be made here, but this is to scale. This is what it looks like in plan view from aerial. And, here's the gully. This is the hand dug dam. That's Natalie Dam, the big machine one. The valley dam is out of the frame. Here was a food forest. This is the road on the right. And then here's the, why we made it in between these houses is because that was literally the only contour line that we could identify with the laser level that met up below this cows, which is the nutrient source. So this is what it looks like. These are some of the swales. This is Natalie Dam, which you can't tell how big it is here, but it's seriously huge. Now moving on really quickly, and I am getting a little bit towards the end here. Sorry that we're taking long, but this is spring recharge, okay? Oh, that title is wrong. So this is the eye of a spring. There's a road down at the bottom here, which we connected this harvesting, this bioswale on contour. And any excess water from that bioswale spills into this dam, which, can you see those teeny tiny little people? I'm one of those people on that ridge of this dam. So it's quite sizable. But if you see here, this is a food forest, and food forest, the one thing I want to say, I hear so many people plant trees. And even literally World Agroforestry or people who are tree people, like institutions with a lot of funding, and they just put a hole in the ground and a tree in it. That's not okay. You have to understand the context of that tree, make a water harvesting structure, mulch, there's a lot of things that go into just planting a tree. So here, this whole food forest on contour, everyone has a water harvesting smile berm. So each one of these is a water harvesting structure, and that is recharging the spring eye, which here in another spring where we did the same exact thing, water harvesting swale on contour off of the road, excess dam, which is used for livestock watering and irrigation. This is the spring eye, which they made a box around. And now there's so much water flowing, you feel guilty that you can't turn the tap off. But the excess, can you see this route where that water also goes to the overflow pond? That is this channel right here. So this is what is the source of this water here, and that just flows into the dam, and then it has a spillway that continues down the natural path of the water. So we're not changing, right? We're not changing the core. I get this this question a lot. Well, you're messing up the hydrology, sending the water in a different route. No, we're not. We're just borrowing. We're just putting it into a bank account, and then whatever's left over, we're sending it on its merry way. And this has increased the water quality and the water flow by, I made a video on it and I can't remember. It used to take 30 minutes to fill a 20-liter jerry can, and now it takes 1 minute and 10 seconds. Okay, so this is the last portion of the presentation, I hope. I went to Yemen, and it was so profoundly amazing and interesting. We have there's an incredible team I was working with there. And I was told all the gendered things about Yemen. Men won't listen to me, whatever. But I found the opposite to be true. They literally did every single thing that I said. So it was just interesting to go through and see all the different interventions the team was trying to do that were related to water, managing flood, capturing water. So here I just spent weeks going through the whole entire, well, not the whole country, but from north to south, explaining so many different flows. I also want to point out here, can you see the roundness? Like a woman lying down, for those who relate to that. That contour, when you have that soft, contour shape of the hilltop, that tells you water I mean, trees used to be there, right? They used to pacify the water before it jackhammered. If you go to the south of the country in Aden, very jagged, angular mountaintops, that is from water behavior. This is new. This is new baldness, okay? Then they showed me these incredible dams, you know, water harvest, surface water retention systems that they were doing. And some of these are archaeological rehabilitation. There I am, surrounded by a bunch of men. And the team here is, they were doing concrete. I hate concrete. Human beings consume more concrete than food, okay, by metric ton. Remember, first concrete, then water, then food. It is ecologically destructive to produce. You can never get rid of it. You can only make it smaller. It sucks. Stop using it. We have better alternatives that as we transition into a new ecological civilization, we are doing. But when I saw this and I could see in the landscape, there was some kind of lime-ish quality. I asked them, do you have limestone and do you polish it using olive oil soap? Because I studied Tadalact with Siggy Coco. If anyone wants to do natural building courses, Google S-I-G-I, Siggy Coco, K-O-K-O. I've done a number of natural building courses with her, and I learned Tadalact, which is a Moroccan high atlas way of taking lime plaster and mechanically and chemically sealing it with a gemstone and olive oil soap. So when I asked them, they were like, hold my beer. They didn't say that, they don't drink there. But they marched me up to the top of this mountain and they showed me this ancient little watering hole on the top of that same mountain that was historically done hundreds of years ago with Tadalact. This is their form of polished lime plaster called kadav. And it looked like a spa, like, you know, you could put some, you know, glass of wine and candles and I will hang out there happily, maybe clean up that water a bit. But so I said to them, stop immediately with the concrete. Let's go back to the kadav. Let's create this economic multiplier effect of having locally produced plasters that are more ecological, and it's part of heritage security, right? We don't want Yemen to lose its identity because it's being bombed by Saudi, bankrolled by US. Like, these are real humans with an incredible rich history. We want to protect it, we want to celebrate it. And when you do this in a place that people are suffering from war and conflict and bombing, they loved it. They absolutely loved it. They stopped the concrete. The government is so happy. The architecture school is happy. And they're doing these archaeological rehabilitations using the natural historic kadav. I also told them, can we just stop sealing the ponds and see what happens? So this is what they did. So I wouldn't have shaped this way. This does not take advantage of the natural contours of the land. It's a giant square. And I had mentioned to them something about putting tree, like islands, like so that you can plant trees. And they're like, oh, look at what we made. We made this for you and we made a tree island for you. I was like, okay, that looks like Mesopotamia, but that's amazing. So anyway, it harvests water and you can see how mucky and filthy this water is, but it's huge. And I said, don't seal it. That water soaks into the landscape to the tune of, the government has sent hydrogeologists to check it out. They have determined on this site alone, this is actually different sites, farmers have 1 additional month of groundwater irrigation from clean water based on this harvesting that we are doing. The governorates surrounding Sada, where this is located, have started to adapt this. We did another site where they did a similar large water harvesting structure for groundwater recharge. And there was a major water event. And 5 days after this major water event, 1 kilometer away, this family sent photos to our team and they said this well dried up years ago and it is now full. And look at that water. You can even see underneath. So I'm ending this presentation on a photo I took in South Sudan, 15 years ago, and it says, there's nothing gloomy about our future. It's highly ironic if you know what's happening in South Sudan because they continue to be in war and conflict. But I just felt that this picture was like hope because you can see how there's really nothing surrounding this woman. This is a woman. But there's hope. And so anyway, that is the end of my presentation. This is another drawing that I made in South Sudan with a woman carrying a bundle of sticks and twigs on top of her head. So a little agroforestry thing, but that was in 2006 that I drew that. So that's the end of the presentation. I'm aware it has taken a very long time, and apologies for that. Thanks so much to the organizers for the opportunity to tell this whole story, which I've never told to this extent. So I hope I'm still online. And that's it.
Natalie, thank you.
That was
badass.
incredible.
Woo! God, what a journey. I'm blown away. I think everyone here is too. That's just stunning. The work that you've done is incredible. You know, like, how many lives have you saved? How many villages have you helped?
I mean, I've not done this alone. You know, I work with teams, I work with Warren, I work with a lot of, this is not a story about me. This is a story about the work and what can be done, what is possible, that anybody can do. You know, I mean, we live on a planet with, this is just a story about gravity. Gravity is the hero here.
Cool. Well, there's a few, barking dogs. There's a few.
Yeah, I can do the questions.
Zach, how about you take over while I deal with this?
Yeah. I mean, just amazing, awesome presentation. A lot of people saying you should write a book. A lot of people saying they want to be you when they grow up, that they'd love to learn from you. I know we'd love to keep hosting you. Are people seeing I think I'm sharing the wrong screen here. First question we got, when you're placing many small smile berms, the arunas on a landscape, how do you go about placing and sizing them to allow all to receive run-on, even when multiple rows are placed down slope of each other on contour? And can you also design them to encourage sheet flow?
I mean, if you did bermless smile berms, you could, but you know, you don't really need to do that. You don't need to do sheet flow with smile berms, because you want a little reservoir for every tree. And then what we do when we make the smile berms is we make one side a little bit lower. So automatically we, you know, the water has an exit route that will go to the next one. But just really quickly, so people understand, like, let's say, you know, if you've got your site and this is like a mountain, what we do is we start to measure like the longest contour on the site. And then we measure out like 3 meters or 4 meters. And those holes become the tree planting hole. And then from here, that's where we start to make the smile berm around each planting hole. And then we use string to triangulate. I don't know if you guys can see this, you know, we take a triangle of string, and that's where we position the next row. And it's not going to be perfect because, you know, your topography is doing all kinds of things. So, you know, so you measure a contour, a long contour, and then you do, depending on how dense you want your forest or a food forest, we do 3 or 4 meters between each planting hole on contour. And then using the smile berm, anyway, so I don't know if that answers the question, but, you know, we start and then we make, you can do the triangle of string above. So you go down below from the longest contour and then above. And it's like a fish scale. You know what I mean by fish scale? It always looks like boobs when I do this. I don't know how else to do it. All right, well, here's a forest of boobs. But you see what I mean by fish scale? So they're offset. I mean, I think in Bill Mollison's permaculture design manual, there's also guidance there.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that answered it well. Next question from Mark. Love your presentation. Here in Hawaii, we have steep denuded slopes with increasing flood and drought events. During flood rains, stormwater rushes into the ocean, depositing sediment and killing our reefs. Can you provide successful examples of large-scale stormwater mitigation on steeper slopes in the subtropics?
I don't know about specific examples, but, you know, you can't do swales on very steep slopes, but you can do other interventions. Like if it's tree planting, or or root-based retention, right? So when you're talking about low-tech erosion control, and it's not only erosion of the soil, it is like if there's chemicals and all of the silt that's flowing into the ocean, again, you know, it's many different small strategies. Like it might be check dams or one rock dams or leaky weirs or gully plugging and tree systems and vetiver or other deep-rooted bamboo. Like I'm sure that Hawaii has its own bamboo structures, and that, I mean, bamboo species, and that can really help to stabilize soil. So again, just make sure that like I feel like permaculture is an anti-gravity movement. Like we're just trying to make sure that nothing moves. So it can be logs, it can be banana sticks, it can be stalks. It can be so many things that you're just trying to respond to the natural contours of the land to, you know, to capture and sieve that siltation before it starts to, you know, roll downhill into the ocean. So, you know, you just have to create a series of traps, stones, big stones, small stones, you know, I'd have to see the site, but really, I would say, you know, being gentle with the landscape. Nature is a moving bus that you want to jump onto. You're not going to strong arm nature and win. Okay. This is when we start to talk about masculine versus feminine approaches within permaculture, within land restoration. Be feminine, like just have a more gentle, you know, step-by-step, strategic, many things, you know, systemically coming together. It is a system. You're trying to harvest and filter out those contaminants or whatever before they reach the place that you don't want them to reach, which in your case is the ocean or the water bodies. So it's a tough question to ask, but hope you're getting the anti-gravity energy.
Yeah, I think that did a really good job of answering it. Next question that actually I saw in the chat a couple of times too. Are there any problems with snakes in these areas? Wondering about the mulch and dangerous creatures. And then also asking about mosquitoes, and do the holding ponds move quickly enough to avoid becoming incubation spaces for their eggs, or how to manage that in those contexts?
Okay, so if we're talking, okay, yes to all. In the training we did in the Sponge Village, like under every rock that we lifted, we had 190 people lifting a lot of rocks. Under like so many of them, we had scorpions and scorpion baby nests. And I lifted one up and there were literally hundreds of little white baby scorpions. Snakes, yes, we have spitting cobras, we have black mambas, we have whatever's. Yes, that is an issue with mulch. If Bill Mollison were here, or somebody say, okay, cats, birds, if you have snakes, make sure you have trees, make sure you get those birds of prey into your system. So look at it systemically. Absolutely. You can't live in isolation or live the chemical way. If you want to just spray chemicals and kill everything and then live in your little house. But this is the balance. As we transition into an ecological civilization, these are the kinds of things we have to figure out how to balance. So either it's going up the food chain or figuring out how do we mitigate that. But absolutely, grass roofs, grasslands, mulches, all of those are habitat for wildlife, including frogs, lizards, snakes, but those people are an important part of the system. And don't forget, it's important to differentiate between snakes. Here in East Africa, a lot of people fears all snakes and don't decipher between, okay, that one's not harmful, I'll leave that one. That one's actually helpful. That one eats rats and kills rodents and pests to my farm. Versus that is a deadly thing, let's relocate it immediately. In the camp in South Sudan, when I lived in a tent, we had 6-foot spitting cobras. They would spit in people's eyes, blind them temporarily. So yes, it is a risk, but that's the you know, the design challenge we have as humans is how do we return to becoming a part of nature in urban and rural areas and manage these risks and perceived risks.
Yeah,
water,
awesome.
Somebody called me a water protecting eco-socialist. That's really funny because I'm about to try to make some new business cards, and I was kind of toying with like water harvesting socialist feminist, water harvesting. I don't know. I'm still working with it, so glad to see that idea. Water harvesting social feminist? No, water harvesting feminist atheist? I don't know. We're still working on it.
Well, definitely
Ironing out.
I
water
don't want to
woman.
lead with that one.
Definitely,
Maybe let it
definitely
come
water woman
secondarily.
in there would be awesome.
And Zach, Rajendra Singh was here in my house some weeks ago, and it was funny. He walked in, he was like, "I am the waterman," and I was like, "I am the water woman." It was just really a funny moment because I don't really self-identify necessarily as like a water person. I feel like water, soil, plants, earthworks, regenerative design person. So I was so happy when you guys are like, "Oh, focus on water," because I've never done that. If you had asked me to do a presentation on agroforestry or soil, or it would have been another 2-hour journey.
And I think, like you said, like it's such an important piece to lead with. There's so many tree planting projects around the world where they're just sticking hundreds, thousands, millions of trees in the ground and accepting that 3/4 of them are going to die because they're not planting the rain before planting the trees.
Yeah. We don't want to plant trees. We want to grow trees. Those are different.
Totally. Question from Roberto. Have you had issues with fire, and what do you do in those cases to prevent it?
I mean, we haven't, I and the work that I've been doing haven't had direct issues with fire, but, as I mentioned, I mean, the more the landscapes become trees provide a buffer from some of these landscape disasters, including fire, because trees provide windbreak. And when they're removed, wind gusts become much stronger. And, ecological degradation does increase fire risk. And, again, when I was in Colorado last month, we had 600 homes, it was on the news, 600 houses burned up in one night. 30,000 people were displaced. I was so angry about that because the homes were made of timber. And I am a natural building aficionada. And if you haven't read that book by Naomi Klein called The Shock Doctrine, I encourage all permies, all regenerative people, have your own shock doctrine, have your own counter shock or green shock doctrine. Because the premise of the book is that, up their sleeves, you have corporate, and government and corrupt people who are just waiting for that moment that a society is brought to its knees so they can push through policies that no one would otherwise ever accept. We, as a regenerative movement and the global ecological conscience movement, must have our own shock doctrine. The next time 600 homes go up in flames, we are knocking at the door of policymakers, protests with not just picket signs, but policy paper. Here it is. We want to be able to build earthen homes, rammed earth, cob houses, super adobe earth bag houses that are resistant to fire, flood, earthquakes, bullets, bombs, whatever your risk is where you are. So no, I have not had but don't forget that fire goes uphill because oxygen rises, and it's like, anyway, fires tend to really rapidly move uphill. So if you have a site, you have to definitely think about the types of trees, how wind is interacting with your site. And if you haven't checked out the permaculture manual by Bill Mollison, how you create the physical and built and ecological structures on your site can totally shift the wind patterns, and those wind patterns with oxygen are what will fuel fire. But I also don't want us to paint fire as the bad guy. There are ancient civilizations and indigenous cultures that have actively, successfully used fire ecology to manage their ecosystems for a long time. So dig deeper on that. Let's not just be anti-fire.
I love the piece about the shock doctrine too. And I saw firsthand, I was in Australia in the 2020 fires, and everyone was ready to change right then. Like, if you had very clear legislation that allowed some of this water harvesting, and they just used it to pass more corrupt legislation that furthered the water scarcity issues. But you're right, we need a counter shock doctrine for those points in time.
Have it ready, have it printed, like it's ready to go right now. And then the minute that shock happens, you show up and just, there are lawyers and people who are within the regenerative movement, policymakers. We need to have literally like a deck of cards of our counter shock policies.
Yeah, well, we know it's coming. We know like mega fires are coming and water scarcity is coming. So yeah, it'd be super useful to have those ready to go. Like my cousin's house pretty much burned got within a football field of burning down that boulder fire. Like one football field. Like they just got lucky.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy.
And the thing is that like, let's back the truck up for a second. Why are we not allowed to build structurally, cob is load bearing, it is structural, to have you only need 6 inches of correct ratios, even 4 inches for interior wall of properly ratioed cob to be structural and load bearing. Okay, 6 inches for external walls. You can go thicker and do like the straw bale width, and there are insulative thermal mass reasons for doing that. But the fact that we are not allowed to build that is infuriating. And there are reasons why that is. There are agendas between timber industries, steel industries, governments, and sorry guys, but I have to say, these are male-dominated industries, okay? I don't wanna like bombard people with feminism, but let's be really real. These are male-dominated industries whose agenda is corruption and profit and exclusive, and there's no space for that anymore. We must be allowed to build resilient houses that have interior climate control that, I never go to the US for different reasons. I go there very rarely, every 3-5 years. And I stayed in friends' homes and they're freezing and they're paying out of the nose for heating and interior climate control. And the walls are thin and they're timber and drywall. I was like, this is insane. How is it possible that this is what is legal and everything else is illegal, but we have to call it pre-legal and push. So get all your friends, write the policies now, have a glass of wine or whatever you want to have, and just develop those things and get ready. The second that any disaster comes, you are there with a regenerative policy, a regenerative approach for housing, natural building, flood mitigation, water harvesting, urban design. It's endless. It's a system. It's all the parts of it. Sorry, I get emotive about this because it's inexcusable that we're allowed to do such destructive, degenerative things at the highest price with the lowest sense-making, Okay, sorry, next question.
And at the same time, the things that make sense are not only not incentivized, they're illegal. We're not even allowed to do them. I totally agree, 100%.
That's why I call it pre-legal, no more illegal.
Yeah, I like that, pre-legal.
Yeah, that's what they say in Quail Springs, in California, pre-legal. Everything's pre-legal.
I like that.
Okay?
Well, let's get set up, because we know fire's going to happen. We know floods are going to happen. Just having those things ready to go. Okay, we're water retention legal plan. Just ready to go. Okay, so quick question for follow-up from Roberto. Are you thinking about creating an educational training online? Natalie's masterclass, anything like that?
Maybe. I mean, I'm in a bit of a transitional period because I've been working with these large agencies as a full-time employee for years, decades, but I'm trying to sort of venture out and I'm independent right now. So my plan right now is to take a break, sleep for like a week, get a mani and a pedi, and then see what happens next. I still have some assignments that I'm doing privately, consulting in South Sudan, and some courses I want to take. So I'm open to anything. Who knows? Yes, why not? Maybe later.
Cool.
But I do, anyone who, there are some people who are familiar with my Facebook and LinkedIn pages or LinkedIn, whatever profiles. When I'm in the field and doing trainings with the teams, I am constantly documenting, just like iPhone videos, not anything fancy, but I try to document and share out everything that I do. It's mostly for the refugees and people that I support, but it's open to everyone and they're public. So once again, if you check out those Facebook groups, you'll see a lot of content that I share out. It's not formalized in classes, but maybe that's something in the future that I could do. If these guys like Zach and Raleigh show me how to do it.
And Natalie, along those lines, I lost the comment, but someone was asking specifically from somewhere in Africa, but a couple of people asked if people want to learn from you, those LinkedIn channels are probably the best place to follow up, or how should they reach out to you?
Yeah, LinkedIn, obviously. So Natalie Topa is my name. If you search that in LinkedIn, you'll find me. And I do post a lot there, and Facebook. yeah, I mean, I'm quite reachable on, yeah, but Facebook, you know, I'm 45, right? I've got like 7 gray hairs going on. So I'm a Facebooker. Snapchat, no way. I don't even know how to spell Snapchat. So I'm old school with my social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. I don't know. I don't use that a lot. Instagram, maybe I'll do more this year. But there's also like, if you do go to YouTube, there's a lot, I mean, not a lot, but there are a number of videos that I've done or produced. So number one, if you search balcony permaculture, again, I'm starting at the smallest scale. If you go to YouTube and Google, see how old school I am, go to YouTube and Google balcony permaculture or the resilient colline, or actually I can probably drop some links. Where do I drop links?
Or you just slap them in the chat box.
Okay, well,
I'll do that. You guys can move on to the next question.
Yeah. Okay, so Yofi really wants you to answer this question. He's like, please. He's saying, Natalie, I have 100 questions for you, but one problem that bothers me.
Jyoti's a woman. She's from her family's from Ethiopia, but she lives in Uganda.
Oh, nice. Okay, you know her, awesome. But her question is 100 questions for you, but the one problem that bothers me the most is the one of drinking water. Do you have any examples of roof water harvesting for drinking water? All over the world, you know, women are going out hiking miles to fetch water and bring it back in 20-liter jerry cans. Meanwhile, you know, we have 1,000 square feet roofs that can collect 550 gallons of water. Is there any place or any way that you see people collecting their own roof water for drinking water?
Yeah. So, hi, Jyothi. Hope you're doing okay. Actually, I met her cousin when I was at Vandana Shiva's course. So yeah, drinking water. So it depends on the scale. Use your rooftops, any surfaces you have to collect water, even if it's a tarp. You literally can take a tarpaulin, plastic sheet on some timbers and just make a funnel. Like it can be really, really easy. But I also want to push us a little bit because a lot of the solar farms that I see are such wasted opportunities because they create dead spaces. That's why I encourage either agrivoltaics or urban integration of solar, PV panels. So drinking water, if it's rooftop water, I mean, you can filter it, but there are people, if you went to Jeff Lawton's farm in Australia and talked about filtering water, you would get laughed at because the water that falls free, fresh, nitrogen rich directly from the sky is among the healthiest water you can possibly have. Water is in 3 sources, okay? Primary water is that which I described, fresh, free, and nitrogen rich from the sky. And that is, and that's primary water. Secondary water is surface water retention, lakes, ponds, dams, riverbeds, and then tertiary water, which is groundwater systems. Humans, because we're dumb and lazy, like that's our first, and we don't understand ecological and hydrological cycles. We're not hydroliterate. We immediately go to the tertiary source as our primary source. That's why in the southwest of Colorado and California and Arizona and Utah, they're freaking out because they've been just sourcing water from neighboring hydrological cycles, but we're not nurturing and investing in the ecological infrastructure and trees, then ecosystem function that ensures our water security. There's only 1 unit of water on our planet, okay? It's either changes from gas or a liquid or a solid. So the problem is it's changing locations and forms, but we can recall it in most cases if we're not too late. Some landscapes can become so brittle that they're almost irreversible, but pro tip, 23,000 years later, the earth flips on its axis, Sahara becomes a wetland. So be patient or harvest water from roofs, surfaces, PV, solar panels, tarps, sheets. It depends on the scale, but Brad Lancaster's videos, just search Brad Lancaster. He has a website called something like rainwaterharvesting.com or something like that. And he can tell you around his home, in his neighborhood, and larger landscapes, things that are done. Also Bill Zidek and Art Ludwig Art, Ludwig, Ludwig, like those are some people who are really in that space, I would say, of sort of urban home water harvesting. And we need more women in this space. Can I just please make a plea, guys? Like, I want to see women in excavators, women operators. I want us to see more images of one another actively doing, you know, in permaculture, women, I feel like many of them kind of hover around the home and garden space. And now in that, you know, of course, we have women in the regenerative movement at the farm scales. But when you talk about the big stuff, right, the machines and the earthworks, that's usually a male dominated space. And there's no need for that. We can bring women into the space. Women are utterly capable. Look at Australia. Women are preferred for those tradie positions because they're more delicate with machines, and especially the underwater, you know, extraction that they're doing and exploration. You need really delicate operation of machinery. Women need to fill the space. Cassie, I hope you're with me. But anyway, I have also a Facebook group called Permaculture Women and Earthworks. Like, please post a picture of yourself in an excavator or whatever, but women, get into the space. Do not be intimidated. Don't be scared. Have the confidence. Let's become carpenters, excavator. I don't drive excavators. I guide the operator. Even better. So
I totally agree 100%. And having worked with both, I'll totally agree as well, as far as women are less likely to get themselves in trouble on a machine, which can be very dangerous, very scary. It's not a great place for a machismo attitude. So yeah, I know as a whole at Water Stories, we're absolutely with you. And you know, I think you also have touched a lot.
And I bet insurance companies prefer women to operate big machines.
I'm sure. Yeah. And you really touched a bit on, you know, how male dominated also the legal stuff is. And I call it the laws of man, not the laws of humans, because usually women and matriarchal societies decide based on what's going to be in the best long-term interest of that place, not the best short-term gains and long-term consequences. And so we really need to rewrite these laws of man and disregard them and follow the laws of nature, which, you know, tend to be aligned with more matriarchal societies as well.
Well, okay, just really quickly, so I know a lot of people are going to roll their eyes at this, and in the permaculture movement, there are a lot of, well, we say spermaculture sometimes, right, because of that attitude. But, you know, this is going to be super unpopular. When we talk about toxic masculinity, people are like, well, what about toxic femininity? That doesn't exist. Toxic masculinity, why we say that is because the things that men learn about what it means to be masculine is be tough, be competitive, be combative, be aggressive, you know, things that can harm other people, right? Be harmful. Those can be harmful. Women are taught, like, be nice, be congenial, be nurturing, you know, those are the messages that we receive. And so literally there is no toxic femininity. There are toxic women for sure. But the point is that mentality, the founding fathers of science, including Bacon, created the masculine birth of time, right? The whole scientific novel about a masculine lens, exactly what you're talking about, the reductionist, Cartesian, mechanistic thinking about nature as an engine that we can pull apart. Whereas the feminine thinking, and I hate that also because, you know, I'm probably more of a masculine female, but not that anyone should read into that. Never gonna get a date again, a heterosexual date, just to clarify. Anyway, but you know, but women and feminine thinking is much more interconnected, interrelated, understanding the systemic, and that's why right now we're shifting towards systemic science, right? Looking at ecology and our living planet. And I'm not a real like kind of too foofy kumbaya person, but Gaia, the whole concept of Gaia as our scientifically as our planet as a living interconnected whole system is way more aligned with sort of, you know, what you're talking about in terms of feminine long-term thinking. So there's my feminist theory. Cheers.
I mean, that's so important. Like the story that you shared, like the cultural difference of you go to these places where the women do all the work and the men are sitting around drinking tea. You know, that's the most masochistic thing I can think about. We're like, yeah, that's my wife. She's the slave. She does all the work. And meanwhile, I'm sitting here drinking. And you're like, what is it's like, what is the cultural difference that enables men to kind of think like that, where their wife is forced to do all the work. And also, I think it was either you or Warren Brush had the story where in one village, the only thing that got the men in the village to work was when the grandma, like the village elder, who was like a grandma, finally picked up a shovel herself and started digging. That was the last straw that like kind of shamed the men into working.
Like, fine, grandma's doing it. Yeah, I mean, the worst, the ultimate for me is when your husband brings home the baby of another baby mama and expects you to raise it or feed it, or, you know, anyway. So that does happen, and that is not an African phenomenon. That, like, welcome to the Milky Way, okay? The United States is listed as the 10th most dangerous country in the world for women, according to US State Department. The #1 death among pregnant women in the United States is murder by a man. So, you know, this is not an African thing. It is not a Middle East thing. I want to be really, really clear. You know, I'm sure in Oregon, you got some really juicy communities up there, like the Minutemen and open carry type, I don't know, I came up with a new term, anti-faxer, you know, like anti-facts. Anyway, so, you know, those kind of cultures breed male dominance and brutality against women and just oppression of women. And it's, you know, we will never have environmental justice on our planet until we have social, ethnic, sexual, all the other justices. There's just one justice. There's only one justice. Okay, there's only one justice. You can't, if you don't value life, you don't value life, whether that's a soil organism or, you know, people get really pissed off at me here because we get locusts and they're like, oh, we have a locust invasion. I'm like, can we back the truck up? Locusts have literally been here for 17 million years. There is one invasive species on our planet. It is humans. Like, hello, we are the biggest invasive species in our galaxy, right? Like, how can we not understand that? So anyway.
And I think there's so much to be gained from a different attitude where you instead treat those events and organisms as something to learn from rather than this enemy to be overcome. I even watched this, it was this global summit about, you know, the urgency that we faced, and they were framing this great war against climate change. And we're never going to move to a better place with this warring attitude. We need to come at it from a whole different space, really.
Well, as a lot of Permies would say, collaboration instead of cooperation, right? Partnership, you know, and that takes a lot of, like, that takes self-work too. I mean, we all have egos, we all have pride, but it's really, I mean, the common point here is about ethics. Like, where do we want to move? I live in Africa right now. There's a massive movement in my industry about localization, kicking people out who are from the global north and making space for the global south. That needs to happen. It has implications for me, for sure. But I know I'm never going to disagree with the fact that that's what needs to happen. White people have privilege. We have to understand that and do what we can to ensure that we are trying to dismantle the implications that has for people. Men have privilege. White women, like, everybody has different privileges. We just need to be aware of them and say, yeah, I do benefit from a system because of this bias. Because I'm a man, or I'm white, or I'm a white woman, or I'm from this part of the world, or I'm wealthy, or I have a certain social status or sexual orientation. So again, you know, real justice environmentally, ecologically, is about the value of life and about being outward and about being communal, you know, about empathy and compassion, right? We have to see each other in our humanity. In our full humanity.
And see that, yeah, we're all part of the same organism. It's this story of separation, that we are our own entity on our, you know, us against the world, when in actuality, we're all part of a much bigger organism that is working collectively, whether individually we're working collectively or not.
When I was a little girl living in Cyprus, somebody told me the story about a wave who was so upset. He was a little jumping wave in the ocean. He was happy, rolling around. And then he saw what was about to happen. Like, the beach was getting closer and closer, and all of his friends were just crashing against the beach. He was crying and was like, stop. He was trying to tell everybody, stop, don't go any further. Don't you see what's about to happen? And they looked at him like, dude, like, you don't get it. You're not a wave. You're part of the ocean. Anyway,
Nice.
when I was
like
different. So
one question from Michael, and we don't want to keep you for too long. We're going to have to wrap this up at some point here, Natalie. So yeah, we do have a few more questions though, if you're game.
Yeah.
One question from Michael, any good resources for a new building code templates?
Oh, well, okay. So, Siggy Coco, who I mentioned, Sigikoko, she's an architect, she's a chemist, she's US based. She is an incredible resource. She has an amazing website. But one thing that she really pounded into us in the courses I've taken with her is the people who work for building codes. And don't forget, I'm an urban planner originally. No, KOKO. But anyway, yeah, same website, KOKO. People who work for building codes and everything, and they are human beings, right? They have a goal, they have an objective. But if you can explain how the structures we want to make meet the goals that they have, first, they need to make sure that we were building safely and soundly and no one's going to be put at risk. And so she provides a great guidance, and I'm sure she's got some, resources on the website of how to work with your local building code regulators to ensure that their concerns are met through the design and installation of your project. So, sorry, it is very possible. People all over, that is the original way of people building, right? Like the whole world lives in cob houses or earthen structures. And so our goal now is to try to return to understanding why they built in a bioregion the way they did. How can we integrate the production of materials in a regenerative way? But I'm so sick of us not building in natural ways. I can't deal with it. Like, I want everyone to live in a thermal mass home that is nice and cool on the inside when it's hot outside with no costs, right? They've got us really by the nose hairs, with interior climate control. You have to pay out of the nose to heat your home, pay out of the nose to cool your home. We are at war with stupidity, as Dr. Shiva says. Stop it. Everybody get your counter shock doctrine in place, daydream, get on Pinterest, whatever you need to do, but we've got to move in that direction. So it's possible all over the country, all over the world. I don't have the resources at hand, but definitely Siggy has. What is Wafati's? Probably a building type.
That was Paul's building method, or was that actually the Wafati? We can talk about Wafati's later.
Yeah, let's not dive off that cliff.
I think there's one person that really wanted to talk live. I think we got a good job answering a lot of the questions out of here. So thanks everybody for answering it. Danielle wanted to speak live, so I'm just gonna let her. She's had her quite hand up like constantly, like da, da, da. So if you're around, Danielle, I'm gonna let you chat for like a little bit here. So I'm gonna allow you to talk if you're down to talk. If not, no worries, and we'll just conclude it up. How you doing?
Hi. Great. Thank you guys so much for doing this. It's been really fantastic. I meant to do that for like a question. I realized you guys were doing the circle questions, but my question was like, other than the obvious ways that you've helped the women in Africa, do you think that like your presence and your attitude really made a difference in men's attitudes of their women as a resource? And I'm just so proud of you for that. So thank you, because
well, I'm 45 and single, so no. No, I mean, it is like, I have a vision. I feel very passionate. I'm only a forward thinking person, I feel like, anyway, and yeah, I can be perceived as outward and extroverted. And so that can have benefits and it can have disadvantages for sure. But I don't think that that's a specifically African thing. I think that's a human thing. And, when I was country director in South Sudan in a war zone, I had a young woman who joined our team, and I just basically told her, you have to sharpen your instincts, because in a nanosecond, you have to figure out if you have to be sweet as pie. If you're faced with a bunch of drunk men with AK-47s, you have to figure out at that moment, I've got two roads I can go down. Do I be sweet as pie, or do I just be an absolute witch right now and just put my foot down and be like, I'm the one in charge? So, yeah, I mean, I think anyone who travels and finds himself in a new context, you know, will come up against trying to understand how they're perceived. But I've been in this context for a long time, almost 2 decades, 17 years in East Africa. And I'm sure I pissed some people off, you know, mostly men. I'm okay with that. I think a lot of things about our world need to change, including harmful gendered norms. I'm outspoken about what I feel about it. I've never been so outspoken as I have in this webinar, to be honest, because for the first time in a long time, I'm independent and I'm not pegged to an agency. But yeah, I don't think that people should hold back. I think we're in a time right now of transition. Like, what are we wasting time for? You know, if you're a professional and you're worried, oh, my boss or my company or my president of my, I don't know what, like, ain't nobody got time for that. Like, we have to say what must be said. We have to do what must be done. And it is harder for people to swallow it often if it's coming from a woman, because women are expected to be more deferential, more soft-spoken, more, you know, compromising. And yeah, that's
I'm actually a geneticist, so I would have to say that having the Polish, I'm also of Polish descent, so I can appreciate your outspoken attitude and keen insight to know when to pull back. So thank you again.
I'm not saying I've perfected knowing when when to pull back or when not to, but I think it's important to practice.
You've done good so far.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Thanks, Danielle. All right. Well, I think we've been at it for about 2.5 hours now. Man, it's been an awesome session. Like, I think like it's fun to run. It's not just about land design. It's like you bringing justice back to people and like just the decency of like, I'm a human being. I want to reclaim basic justice of my life and going beyond just the water capture, but you know, saving someone's life is incredible. So thank you for sharing the journey of how you've helped these villages do that. And, you know, what you've done, Warren Brush, and I really hope that we'll tell more stories like that. And that's what we're trying to do, a water story. So I really appreciate this. And everyone who's been a part of this, thank you for showing up. Thank you for donating your morning to hear Natalie's story and all these stories that we're going to share. And everyone's getting the replay after this. And I hope you stick around and really continue this journey that you're on, whether you're a community activist, whether you're trying to be a practical professional doing this water work, whether you just own a piece of land and want to make it a paradise. Doesn't matter where you're at, you can make a difference. And I hope like Natalie said, like when the emergencies happen, you're ready to move and you have a plan to make a big difference here. So,
and Raleigh, I just want to end by saying that like there are more solutions than problems.
Yeah.
And it's fun and it's exciting and it's good news. So like put your mind and your energy there. And as Warren says, you know, put your life's energy into life affirming endeavors. Yes, there's bad stuff happening. Yes, bad news. Yes, bad, you know, don't protest. Who was it? Mother Teresa, you know, that saint, Teresa. Don't ever invite me to an anti-war rally. I will never go to an anti-war rally. Invite me to a peace rally, you know? So that's the difference. We know bad things are happening. We're on our way out. Be part of the good story. So that was just what I wanted to say. And then lastly, is there any chance of getting a copy of the chats? I wasn't able to engage at all.
Oh, yeah.
With the comment.
Yeah, I'm saving this right here. I'll send it to you right after, but yeah, you'll get the chats. It'll be great. And yeah, we'll follow up with everybody after this in the replay. And yeah, we'll keep this interaction going. It was fun seeing people on Circle, but I know we're going to build a bigger community of people that support each other who are doing water work. And it's going to be really exciting building that. So Natalie, hope you're going to be a part of that and lend your insights. That'll be great.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for the opportunity. And thanks everyone who stayed around for hours and hours.
And thanks so much for coming on, speaking truthfully, speaking honestly. I mean, you painted the picture so clearly, and I think that's so important. We have so much bad news, but when you can very clearly show, here's what we did and here's what it looked like X months later, yeah, that just paints the picture clear as day for anybody. So thank you for bringing that to the table. We really appreciate it. It's been an honor and pleasure to have you on here.
Likewise, and thank you guys, Cassie, Zach, and Raleigh, for for doing this, for putting your energy to like trying to highlight and connect everybody. So that's so important and really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
You got it. All right, everybody.
All right.
Well, have a great day. Chat soon. Peace.
All right.
Sleep
Good
well,
day.
Natalie.
Bye.
Bye.